There are places on this planet that refuse to die, places where silence has memory, and the earth still keeps its secrets close. From frozen bones that whisper of forgotten tribes, to underwater tombs where gods sleep beneath the waves, each discovery pulls us closer to a truth we were never meant to forget. Because long before history was written, the world was already leaving messages, carved in stone, sealed in ice, and buried beneath our feet. And tonight, we're going to uncover them. One chapter at a time. The bone labyrinth beneath Unexplained. Beneath the humid canopy of the Belizean jungle, where the air trembles with the sound of cicadas and the soil breathes the scent of rain and limestone, lies a cave system unlike any other on Earth. The Maya called it Unexplained, the cave of the crystal sepulchre, but to those who have entered its depths, it feels more like a cathedral carved by the gods themselves. At the mouth of the cave, sunlight disappears almost instantly, swallowed by black water that runs colder than anything above ground. To step inside is to walk backward through time. Every echo, every drop, every shimmer of light against the wet stone carries the weight of 1,000 forgotten voices. Archaeologists once thought Unexplained was merely a burial chamber, a place where the Maya laid their dead to rest. But the deeper they explored, the less that explanation made sense. The bones, hundreds of them, were not scattered, they were placed, carefully, deliberately. Whole families arranged in silent geometry, faces turned toward unseen constellations, limbs aligned with the cave's natural contours, as if in conversation with the earth itself. As torchlight flickers across the walls, faint carvings appear, spirals, suns, and something resembling star maps. They seem to chart not just the heavens but movement through time, as though the people who carved them understood something celestial that modern science is only beginning to glimpse. Among the shards of pottery and fragments of obsidian, researchers found traces of intense heat, as if fire had once erupted inside the sealed chambers. Some vessels were fused into the rock, melted in a way that shouldn't be possible without modern temperatures. What kind of ritual could have produced such heat inside a cave filled with water? At the heart of the labyrinth, the explorers found her, the figure now known as the Crystal Maiden, the skeleton of a young woman, perhaps no older than 20, lying perfectly preserved where she fell more than 1,000 years ago. Over centuries, the limestone drip water crystallized her bones until they shimmered like quartz, glowing faintly under torchlight. Her position is strange. Arms open, palms facing upward, head tilted toward a fissure in the ceiling where a narrow shaft of light descends once a year, on the day of the summer solstice. At that exact moment, the beam illuminates her body completely. The Maya built this alignment with intention. But why? Some say she was a sacrifice, offered to the gods of rain and fertility to end a time of drought. Others believe she was something more, a chosen vessel, a living bridge meant to communicate between the human and the divine. In Maya cosmology, caves were living beings, the lungs and veins of the world. To enter them was to enter the body of the earth itself. Blood offerings, chants, and the rhythmic echo of drums would fill these chambers, resonating until the sound itself seemed to breathe. Modern acousticians studying the site have noticed something remarkable. The cave amplifies certain frequencies and cancels others, creating standing waves that can induce trance-like states. It's as if the architects of Unexplained designed not a tomb, but a sonic machine, a structure that could alter the consciousness of those within. Even stranger are the bones themselves. Some are arranged in spiral formations, others stacked to form shapes that mimic constellations visible from the jungle canopy above. Recent studies using 3D scanning revealed that these patterns match the layout of the Pleiades cluster, one of the most important symbols in Maya myth. The same cluster appears carved into nearby pottery and painted onto walls deep within the inner chambers. Could the rituals performed here have been timed with celestial events? Yet, beyond the archaeology lies something far more elusive. Every explorer who's entered Unexplained describes a presence, a feeling that grows stronger the deeper one ventures. Some call it pressure, others energy. One researcher wrote that when she turned off her headlamp to rest, the darkness felt alive, pulsing as though the cave itself were breathing. Another described hearing rhythmic thuds, too slow to be dripping water, too steady to be coincidence. When he checked his audio recorder later, those sounds were gone, replaced only by silence. Local guides still refuse to speak of certain chambers after dusk. They say the spirits of the crystal people guard their secrets and that anyone who enters without permission risks never returning. Whether legend or not, more than one expedition has ended abruptly when equipment failed, lights flickered, and team members swore they saw movement in the shadows. But despite the fear, the discoveries continue. Fragments of jade, obsidian, and shell ornaments point to offerings brought from hundreds of miles away. This was no local shrine, it was a pilgrimage site of immense significance, a place where rulers and priests came to commune with something beneath the earth. Some even suggest the rituals of Tunachil may have been part of an ancient network, caves aligned across the Maya world, each serving as a node in a spiritual grid connecting temples, mountains, and stars. If true, it means that what lies beneath Belize is not just a relic, it's part of a system that spans centuries and civilizations. The Maya may have believed that when the right sound, light, and blood met in the right place, the boundary between worlds dissolved. The cave wasn't just an altar, it was a key. Today, scientists can map every tunnel, measure every bone, analyze every mineral, but they cannot explain the purpose. The data says ritual, the evidence says precision, but the feeling says something else. Something intelligent, deliberate, and patient, waiting in the dark. Perhaps that's why Tunachil still draws explorers from across the world. They come with cameras, scanners, and sensors, but leave with more questions than answers. Because here, deep beneath the jungle, the Maya left behind more than bones. They left a message carved in stone and silence. One that says the past is not dead, it's only sleeping. And beneath the surface, something ancient still listens. So the next time you hear about a discovery hidden beneath the earth, remember this cave, the bone labyrinth of Tunachil, where every echo may be a voice from a world that never truly vanished. And if mysteries like this keep you searching, keep you wondering what else the ancients left behind, then stay with us. Like and subscribe, because the deeper we go, the stranger the truth becomes. The Petrified Codex of Tartaria. In the rolling fields of Transylvania, Romania, far from the grandeur of pyramids or the precision of stone circles, lies a discovery that quietly defies our understanding of history. A discovery so small, it could fit in the palm of your hand, yet so powerful it threatens to rewrite the origins of writing itself. The story begins in 1961, when archaeologist Nicolae Vlasa was excavating a Neolithic settlement near the village of Tartaria. He wasn't expecting anything unusual, just pottery shards, animal bones, and traces of everyday life from a forgotten age. But then, among the ashes of an ancient fire pit, he found 3 small clay tablets, hardened by time, marked with strange, deliberate symbols. They looked like writing. The tablets, no larger than a deck of cards, were engraved with rows of pictograms, suns, crescents, zigzags, and a sequence of signs no one had ever seen before. And when carbon dating came back, the world of archaeology held its breath. These tablets weren't from Egypt, they weren't from Mesopotamia, they were older, thousands of years older. The Tartaria tablets dated back to around 5300 BC. That's nearly 2 millennia before the earliest known Sumerian cuneiform. If authentic, these fragile pieces of clay would mean that the first written language, the first attempt by humans to record thought, began not in the Fertile Crescent, but in the heart of Europe. But the questions began immediately. Who made them? And what do they say? The people of that region, known as the Vinca culture, left behind no cities, no empires, only villages, ceramic figurines, and tools of bone and copper. Yet their artistry was advanced, their symbols repeated across thousands of artifacts found throughout the Balkans. It was as if a hidden civilization had flourished here, organized, spiritual, and literate, long before Sumer rose on the plains of Iraq. As Vlasa examined the tablets, he noticed something else. 2 of them were clearly ritualistic. One was pierced with holes, perhaps meant to be worn like an amulet. Another bore a pattern resembling an altar, with markings that mirrored constellations. The third, the most mysterious, seemed to depict an entire language system in miniature. 30 signs, each carefully arranged, each carved with purpose. It wasn't random, it was syntax. But how could a people from 7,000 years ago have a written system when history says writing hadn't even been invented yet? Some scholars argued the symbols were simply decorations, religious icons without phonetic meaning. Others, including linguist Maria Gimbutas, disagreed. She believed the tablets were sacred text from what she called Old Europe, a peaceful, matriarchal civilization that worshipped the earth as a living goddess. According to her theory, these were not just carvings, but prayers. And there's another layer, one rarely discussed. When the tablets were discovered, they were found next to human bones, specifically the remains of a woman. Her body had been burned and buried in the same pit as the tablets, along with jewelry, figurines, and animal offerings. Some archaeologists now think she was a priestess, sacrificed or honored in a ritual meant to seal the words into eternity. It's as if the tablets were never meant to be read, but activated. Under modern analysis, the clay composition doesn't quite match anything from nearby sources. It contains traces of materials found deeper underground, suggesting it might have been extracted deliberately from a sacred site, perhaps a cave or riverbed, believed to connect to the spirit world. In ancient myth, clay wasn't just earth, it was the flesh of the gods, the medium from which humanity was shaped. So what if these tablets weren't records of daily life, but instructions, a codex describing how the divine spoke through matter? Across the Balkans, similar symbols have been found, on idols, pottery, and even megalithic altars. Taken together, they form what researchers now call the Danube script, a possible proto-writing system that spans modern-day Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece. It suggests a network of settlements, connected not by conquest, but by shared belief, communicating through sacred marks passed down for generations. The Vinca script, if real, would mean Europe had a literate civilization while Egypt and Sumer were still in their infancy. It would mean history began elsewhere. But controversy shadows the Tartaria tablets even today. The original pieces were baked in a laboratory after discovery, a procedure that may have destroyed vital traces of organic residue, making absolute dating nearly impossible. Some accuse Vlasa of staging a hoax. Others claim he stumbled upon a relic so disruptive that academic institutions quietly buried its implications. Whatever the truth, the mystery deepened when linguists began comparing the Tartaria signs with those of early Sumer. They found startling similarities, identical symbols for sun, grain, and water. Could there have been contact between the two regions long before recorded history? Could migration, trade, or a forgotten cultural bridge have carried the world's first written ideas across continents? Recent digital scans have revealed microscopic tool marks that indicate precision engraving, not casual scratching. Each line was etched before firing, suggesting premeditation and care. This wasn't improvisation, it was ritual technology. Some archaeologists even speculate that the tablets were astronomical records, early attempts to track celestial cycles, lunar phases, or eclipses. If true, the priestess buried with them might have been more than a spiritual figure. She might have been an astronomer, a keeper of cosmic time. And yet, beneath all the theories, there's a feeling, one that every researcher who's handled the tablets describes, a weight, not of stone, but of meaning. They feel alive, as though carrying not just symbols but intent, a message pressed into clay by human hands that believed they were writing something eternal. When the light catches the faint grooves of those marks, they almost seem to shift, forming new shapes in the shadows. The tablets whisper that our story, the story of civilization, didn't begin in one cradle, but many, and perhaps the first words we ever wrote were not to each other, but to the gods. The Tartaria tablets remain locked in museum vaults today, fragile, priceless, and still unread. Yet their presence challenges the neat timelines we're taught. They remind us that human genius has no single birthplace, and that sometimes the greatest revolutions in thought are etched not on monuments of gold, but on scraps of clay, buried beneath forgotten soil. In the end, maybe the question isn't what the symbols mean, but why they were made at all. Were they warnings? Prayers? Or the first attempt to preserve memory itself? Whatever they are, one truth remains. Somewhere in the forests of Transylvania, the earth still hides stories written long before history began, keeping score. So the next time someone tells you we know when civilization started, remember the petrified codex of Tartaria, where words turned to stone, and history began to whisper back. The sky burial stones of Gurem. High above the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia, where the wind carves rock into impossible shapes and the sunrise paints the valleys in gold, there are stones that don't belong, not to the churches carved by monks, not to the homes of hermits, but to something far older, something that once reached for the sky, not to live but to die. This is the story of the sky burial stones of Gurem, and the mystery of a forgotten ritual that turned death itself into an offering to the heavens. Cappadocia, central Turkey, a landscape so alien it could be mistaken for another world. For centuries, it has been a refuge, a monastery, a home carved into volcanic rock. But long before Christianity arrived, before frescoes and prayer halls filled these caves, this land held a different kind of faith, one that believed the spirit didn't descend into the underworld, it ascended to the stars. Hidden in the hills near Gurem, archaeologists have found flat circular platforms carved into the rock, some perched on high cliffs, others isolated on pillars that rise above the valley floor. Each one bears the same design, a central hollow, perfectly round, with drainage grooves that run outward like veins. To some, they're simple altars. To others, they are sky burial stones. In the highlands of Tibet, sky burials were meant to return the body to nature, left to the vultures who carried the soul to the heavens. But here in Cappadocia, the same concept seems to appear thousands of miles away, and perhaps thousands of years earlier. It suggests something astonishing, a parallel ritual, born from a shared human desire to touch eternity. Local legends speak of the Watchers of the Sky, ancient priests who climbed these cliffs carrying the dead, chanting prayers to the winds. They believed that life was borrowed, not owned, and that when the flesh was gone, the bones must rest where air and earth meet. The hollowed circles, some say, were for bodies, placed in fetal position, aligned with the rising sun. The grooves, to let rain and blood wash down into the valley, a symbolic return of life to the land. But who were these people, and why did they vanish? Traces of their settlements lie buried under newer layers of civilization, deeper than Hittite ruins, older than known Cappadocian cultures. Stone tools found nearby show craftsmanship that doesn't match the later cave dwellers. Some even suggest the sky burial stones predate agriculture in the region. That would mean these platforms were part of one of the oldest funerary systems in human history. What's more, several of the Gurame stones are aligned with celestial markers. When the sun rises on the solstice, light strikes the center of one platform and reflects off another 100 meters away. To the ancients, this might have symbolized rebirth, the soul's journey through light. To modern archaeologists, it suggests astronomical intent. Death in this world wasn't the end. It was a cosmic event. When early explorers mapped Gurame's cave systems, they noticed something curious: narrow tunnels leading upward from the burial platforms into hidden chambers above. These sky chambers were carved into the rock domes, small and acoustically tuned. A whisper could echo like a chant. Sound engineers later confirmed the frequencies within matched those used in meditation practices that induced trance states. Could it be that these priests used sound to guide souls, or perhaps to connect with something beyond? An ancient inscription found on a nearby stone slab may hold a clue. Though eroded, the translation reads roughly, "The breath returns to the wind, the flame returns to the stars." It's poetry, but also theology. It describes a belief system where the elements reclaim the body, a philosophy mirrored across distant ancient cultures. In one particular site known as the Valley of the Echoing Stones, excavators uncovered a circle of rock pedestals surrounding a central platform. Underneath, they found charred bone fragments, not human but avian, falcons, vultures, perhaps sacrificed, perhaps sacred companions of the dead. The ancients may have seen these birds as intermediaries, living bridges between the earth and the sky, and when the body was offered, the birds took what was mortal and left behind what was eternal. Modern historians often dismiss such ideas as coincidence, that these platforms were simply for grain drying or sacrificial rites, but the geometry, the elevation, and the weathering patterns suggest deliberate placement. Each platform faces east, the direction of rebirth. Each groove leads downward, toward life below. The entire system seems engineered to embody the cycle of death and renewal. As the centuries passed, new civilizations arrived: the Hittites, the Persians, the Romans, and eventually, Byzantine monks who carved churches into the same cliffs. But some of those early churches were built directly on top of the ancient sky platforms, as if the new faith sought to overwrite the old. And yet, inside those very churches, we still find stars painted on ceilings, angels with wings like birds of prey, and imagery of ascension. The echoes of the sky burial cult lived on, transformed, but never erased. Today tourists visit Gurame for its beauty, not its ghosts. Hot air balloons drift over the valleys each morning, rising just as the ancients once hoped their souls would. From above, the burial platforms look like eyes, watching the horizon, waiting for sunrise, waiting for what once was holy, and perhaps, in a way, it still is. Geologists have recently scanned several unexcavated areas near the old Gurame monasteries. Beneath the surface, they've detected hollow voids, tunnels, and chambers extending in impossible directions. Some appear to lead directly beneath the ancient burial stones. If these are confirmed, it would mean the sky burials were part of a larger subterranean network, a bridge between worlds, both physical and spiritual. It paints a haunting picture: a people who carried their dead to the heavens above, and yet built pathways to the depths below. A civilization obsessed not with life or death, but transition, the movement of the soul through every element of existence. The sky burial stones of Gurame remind us that even before temples and tombs, humans had already begun searching for a way to make death meaningful. They didn't fear it, they engineered it. They carved death into the very landscape, turning mountains into monuments, valleys into cathedrals of air. When the sun dips low over Cappadocia and shadows stretch across the stone, the old platforms seem to come alive again. The wind hums through the hollows, and the same vultures that once circled above still soar on the updrafts, tracing the ancient paths of souls long gone. Perhaps that's the message they left behind, that our stories don't end in the ground, that life, like the wind that shaped this land, continues to move, carving, eroding, creating, forever. And as the light fades, the stones of Gurame stand silent, monuments not to death, but to the oldest dream of humankind, to rise once more. The ashen ziggurat of Jiroft. Beneath the sun-scorched plains of southeastern Iran lies a ruin that refuses to fit into history. A step pyramid of ash and stone, older than Mesopotamia, built by hands we can no longer name. When the desert wind sweeps over Jiroft, it whispers of a city that burned long before Babylon rose, and of a ziggurat that may have carried the first fire to the gods. This is the story of the ashen ziggurat of Jiroft, a monument buried by time, resurrected by chance, and still wrapped in smoke. In 2001, after a season of violent floods near the Halil River, villagers began unearthing strange relics: chloride vases carved with serpents, winged men, and creatures with horns like stars. Archaeologists rushed in thinking they'd found a lost outpost of Sumer. But as they dug deeper, they realized something impossible. The layers of Jiroft were older than Sumer itself, and at the heart of those ruins lay a structure unlike anything in Iran, a massive, tiered platform of stone and baked clay, its surface blackened as if by flame. The locals called it the Ashen Hill. Its builders had raised it from volcanic rock and then, for reasons still unknown, set it ablaze. The layout matched no known ziggurat. Its steps were broader, its corners slightly curved, its central altar carved from obsidian. The entire monument faced east, toward the sunrise, but also toward the Indus Valley. That single alignment sparked decades of debate. Was Jiroft a forgotten bridge between Mesopotamia and India, a civilization that once linked two ancient worlds? When archaeologists sifted through the ash, they found something extraordinary: thin sheets of copper fused into the clay itself, as if the ziggurat had once conducted heat or energy. Was it ritual? Was it accidental metallurgy? Or was it part of a forgotten technology, a primitive furnace meant to mimic the power of the sun? Legends from the region speak of a mountain of smoke, a place where the gods were born from fire. In one tablet fragment, the inscription reads, "We built steps for the flame to climb." It's poetic, yet chillingly literal. The ashen ziggurat seems to have been a temple not for idols, but for fire itself. Around the base, archaeologists uncovered channels carved into the bedrock, leading outward like rivers frozen in stone. When filled with oil and lit, these channels could have encircled the monument in a ring of flame, a living sun on earth, visible for miles across the desert. Perhaps that was the point, a ritual of light to summon the dawn, or to mark the death of a king as he ascended to join the gods in smoke. Traces of human sacrifice were never confirmed, but bones, scorched and fragmentary, were found in the lowest tier. Some wore copper rings, others fragments of turquoise. Their placement suggests deliberate offering, bodies sealed within the clay before the final burn. Whatever the purpose, the builders meant this monument to last and to be seen by the heavens. But the ziggurat's fate was violent. Sometime around 2500 BCE, a massive earthquake struck the region. The structure cracked, collapsed, and burned again. This time not by design. Ash rained down on the city, sealing it beneath layers of dust for over 4,000 years. When infrared imaging surveyed the site in 2016, researchers discovered a geometric pattern under the ruins, a buried city grid aligned perfectly with the ziggurat's cardinal axes. Every street pointed toward the monument, as if the entire city had been constructed as a cosmic diagram, a map of the heavens mirrored on Earth. At its center, the ziggurat stood not merely as a temple, but as a symbol of order, the axis mundi, the connection between fire below and light above. And yet the mystery deepened. Beneath the lowest platform, sonar scans revealed a hidden chamber. When excavators reached it, they found jars of fine gray dust, ash so pure it looked metallic. Samples revealed traces of magnetite and carbon, the remains of extreme, sustained heat, the kind used in smelting or in ancient cremation. Was this the residue of ritual fire, or the ashes of those who built the monument? No one knows. The inscriptions around Jiroft's artifacts tell fragments of a forgotten script, a language not yet fully decoded. But among them, one symbol repeats, a rising flame inside a stepped triangle. The same symbol was later found in Sumerian and Elamite seals, a distant echo of the original fire cult of Jiroft. It suggests that what began here, the worship of flame as divine intelligence, may have spread across the ancient world. Some scholars even call Jiroft the mother civilization, a cradle that gave birth to ideas later seen in Mesopotamian temples, in Zoroastrian fire altars, and perhaps even in the sacred geometry of Egyptian pyramids. Each stone step, each layer of ash, is a page from the unwritten story of how humanity first tried to reach the gods through light. Today, the ziggurat stands mostly silent, a mound of blackened clay under the Iranian sun. But when the wind passes through its hollow corridors, it sounds like a low hum, almost like chanting. The air smells faintly of dust and minerals, the scent of something that once burned too brightly to last. Scientists continue to study its foundations, and each year, new fragments emerge: obsidian blades, fire-tempered ceramics, beads carved from meteoric iron, pieces of a puzzle that refuses to settle into one civilization's timeline. What's certain is this: Jiroft was no simple outpost. It was a kingdom of architects, astronomers and priests, a people who understood not only how to build with stone, but how to consecrate it with fire. As night falls over the Halil River plain, the dark outline of the ashen ziggurat rises against the stars. The same constellations that its builders once watched still circle overhead. Perhaps in their ritual fires, they weren't just honoring the heavens, they were trying to speak to them. Each flame, each offering, a message carried upward on smoke, to a god that might have been the sky itself. And maybe that's why the ruin still feels alive. Because long after its people vanished, their idea survived, that the divine isn't beyond our reach, it's within the elements around us, waiting to be reignited. In the heart of Iran, the ashes of Jiroft still hold their glow. a memory of a civilization that burned itself into legend and left behind a message written not in words, but in fire. The forgotten observatory of Chanquillo. In the barren deserts of northern Peru, beneath a sun that has burned unchanged for millennia, lies a forgotten crown of stone that once ruled the sky. Here at Chanquillo, the earth rises into a serrated spine of 13 towers, each one placed with an impossible precision that seems to hum with purpose. The wind whispers through their gaps like breath through the ribs of a sleeping god, and as the sun drifts from east to west, its light passes between those stones like the ticking of an ancient celestial clock. For centuries, no one understood what this place was. It was too perfect, too deliberate to be a ruin of chance. When explorers first stumbled upon it, they thought it must have been a fortress, a stronghold against invisible enemies, built in the age before iron. The walls were thick, the corridors winding, the sightlines commanding. But there were no signs of war, no ashes of battle, no graves of soldiers. Instead, there were altars, offerings, the faint residue of ceremony and time. As the decades passed, and the desert gave up its secrets one grain at a time, scholars began to see Chanquillo differently. Its towers did not guard against armies, they guarded against uncertainty. They were not designed to repel men, but to measure the heavens. Each gap between the stones marks the rise and fall of the sun throughout the year. Stand in the right place at dawn, and you can watch the sun climb precisely between two towers on the summer solstice. Wait 6 months, and it rises between the towers on the opposite side, the winter solstice. Between them, every day has its place, every sunrise its mark. It is the world's oldest known solar observatory, predating the great Mayan calendars, older even than the shadow-tracing stones of Stonehenge. Imagine the people who built it. They had no metal, no telescopes, no written language that we can still read, but they had the sky, and the patience to study it for generations. They watched the seasons flow like breath, the dry months that cracked the earth, the brief green pulses when rain returned. They noticed that the sun did not rise in the same place every morning, but slowly drifted along the horizon, tracing an invisible arc across the year. And so they marked it with towers, anchoring time itself to the land. Through their stones, the people of Chanquillo turned light into memory. The fortress at the center of the site was more than shelter. From its walls, priests or astronomer priests once watched the towers with trained eyes, calling out when the sun touched the edge of a stone. Below, the farmers waited for the signal, when to plant, when to harvest, when to honor their gods. In a land where life depended on the rhythm of the sun, these men held the calendar of the world in their hands. They were the keepers of order, the interpreters of time. Every sunrise, every shadow, was a message from the heavens. When the site was first excavated, fragments of pottery, offerings, and human bones were found buried beneath the sand. Some were scorched, others carefully placed. It seemed that over centuries, the observatory had become more than a tool. It had become sacred ground. The sun, once measured, was also worshipped. Perhaps the towers were not only markers but messengers, forming a bridge between the living and the divine. At dawn, when the first light split between the stones, it would have cast its glow directly upon the fortress, flooding it with gold. To stand there then would have been to feel eternity pass over you. Even today, the design of Chanquillo baffles modern engineers. Each tower aligns so precisely that seasonal shifts can be measured to within a single day. The builders had no compass, no advanced geometry, yet they shaped an instrument more enduring than any bronze gear or crystal lens. The desert tried to erase it. Storms buried it. Time softened its edges. But still it stands, 13 guardians of sunlight frozen in stone. When archaeologists finally understood what they were looking at, they realized they had found a calendar older than history itself. Chanquillo rewrote what we thought we knew about civilization in the Americas. But there is another mystery here, one that no measurement can solve. Who built it? The people of Chanquillo left no texts, no clear cultural descendants, no myths that mention their observatory. Their civilization rose, flourished, and vanished before the empires of the Incas or the Nazca drew their first lines in the sand. All that remains is this quiet architecture of precision, towers that speak in light and silence. Some researchers believe the observatory was abandoned after a period of warfare or drought. Others think it was intentionally sealed, left as an offering to the very sun it once charted. Whatever the truth, the towers became part of the desert, waiting for us to remember them. Stand there today at dawn, and you can feel what they must have felt. The immensity of the sky pressing down, the first flare of orange cresting the distant ridge, the slow march of light cutting across the stones. For a moment, you understand what it means to measure time, not by clocks, but by the heartbeat of the world itself. Chanquillo is not a ruin. It is a language written in stone and sunlight, and after thousands of years, it still speaks, quietly, faithfully, endlessly. Perhaps that is the greatest secret of Chanquillo. It was never about predicting the future or controlling the heavens. It was about remembering that life and light are bound together, that every dawn, every season, every passing year is part of a pattern far older than us. And though the builders are gone, their calendar still turns, one sunrise at a time. The towers still count the days, and the desert still listens. Somewhere, across that shimmering horizon, the same sun that they once worshipped still rises between the stones. Not for them anymore, but for us. The salt mummified priests of Hallstatt. Deep beneath the Austrian Alps, where the mountains bleed salt and the air tastes of ancient stone, lies a network of tunnels older than history itself. This is Hallstatt, a name whispered by archaeologists with reverence and awe. Today it is a postcard village perched beside a mirror lake, but far below the tourist trails and quiet cottages sleeps one of the most haunting archaeological mysteries ever unearthed. The salt mummified priests of Hallstatt. It was here, buried in crystalline darkness, that men once carved the lifeblood of an empire from the mountain's core. Salt, the mineral that preserved meat, cured fish, and as it turns out, preserved human flesh. When miners first stumbled upon leathery remains deep inside the tunnels in the early 18th century, they were stunned. The bodies were not skeletons but entire forms frozen in time, skin, hair, even the folds of their garments intact, glistening under lantern light like statues of amber. For centuries, locals whispered that the mountain was cursed, that the dead had been trapped there as punishment, or entombed as offerings to some forgotten god of the underworld. But science tells a different story, one no less strange. The salt itself had mummified them naturally, drying the flesh so completely that decay never came. The miners of Hallstatt had become their own relics, preserved in the very material they harvested. The oldest tunnels date back more than 7,000 years, making this not only the world's oldest salt mine but one of humanity's earliest industrial complexes. Entire generations were born, worked, and died under this mountain, carving their existence into its veins of white crystal. Yet the bodies found here tell of something more than labor, something ritualistic. Among the mummified remains were traces of woven garments far finer than the rough tunics of workers. Some wore ornaments made of bone and amber, symbols stitched into their belts. Their skulls showed no signs of mining injuries, their hands no calluses of labor. It was as if these men had come not to dig but to perform. Around them, archaeologists found offerings, pottery shards, animal bones, carved tools arranged as though in ceremony. Could these have been priests of salt, custodians of a sacred substance that connected earth, life, and death? In the Bronze Age, salt was not simply food or currency, it was divine. To preserve life was to master decay itself, to hold back time. The people of Hallstatt believed salt came from the mountain's spirit, a living entity that gave and took in equal measure. When the tunnels collapsed or workers vanished, it was said the mountain had reclaimed what was owed. Inside these silent caverns, the air is so dry and cold that a candle burns without smoke, its flame trembling as if afraid. Imagine walking those tunnels centuries ago, the scrape of iron tools echoing through the stone, the flicker of torchlight revealing walls that sparkle like frozen starlight. Down here, time bends. Generations worked where their ancestors had perished, aware that one misstep could bury them forever. Yet they returned, driven by the belief that salt was life, that to serve the mountain was to serve eternity. The mummified bodies found in the 18th and 19th centuries shocked Europe's scientific world. At first they were treated as curiosities, displayed like saints. Then came the realization, these were not random victims, they were deliberate burials, placed with care. Some were found seated, hands crossed, eyes closed as if in meditation. The salt had turned them into statues, guardians of the mine itself. In one chamber, archaeologists uncovered a small altar cut directly into the rock. Upon it lay traces of burnt fat, animal bone, and salt crystals arranged in patterns. Was this where offerings were made before each descent into the mountain's depths? To ask permission from the earth before disturbing its veins? Some researchers believe the priests of Hallstatt oversaw such rites, ensuring balance between man and mountain. Others think they were volunteers chosen to remain, to die within the salt, ensuring the mine's fertility through their sacrifice. The idea is almost unthinkable, yet it would not be the first time ancient cultures believed in blood for bounty. To them, salt was not a mineral, it was the body of the gods. When modern archaeologists re-entered the tunnels with lights, cameras, and precision instruments, they found walls still stained with the ghostly silhouettes of miners' hands. Pick marks from thousands of years ago remain untouched, as if the workers had just stepped away. Salt does not age, it simply endures. The air still smells faintly metallic, like breath caught in the throat of the earth. And somewhere beneath those endless strata, the mummified priests still lie, perfectly preserved, skin like parchment, eyes sunken but eternal. DNA tests have revealed that some of these bodies predate the Iron Age, linking them to peoples long vanished from the region. Their diet, recorded in the chemistry of their bones, tells of grain, pork, and salted fish, the very foods their mine allowed civilization to store. They were, in every sense, sustained by the substance that would one day preserve them. The Hallstatt culture, named after this place, gave Europe its first taste of complex trade. From here, salt traveled across the continent, carried in caravans, traded for bronze, gold, and ideas. The wealth of Hallstatt built kingdoms and funded wars. Yet beneath the prosperity, the rituals continued. Every collapse, every flood within the tunnels was answered with ceremony. Fires were lit, salt sprinkled, words whispered into the dark. They believed that the mountain listened, that it remembered. Perhaps that is why their bodies remain so perfect, not by accident, but by design. Each burial a prayer sealed in mineral, each face a message to the future. When you stand in the Hallstatt salt mine today, surrounded by silence so thick it feels alive, you sense that presence. The tunnels still hum faintly, the crystals glittering with their own light. Somewhere deeper, the temperature never changes, the humidity never shifts. It is as if the mountain itself is still keeping watch. Tourists walk through illuminated passages now, their laughter echoing off walls carved before the pyramids rose. But there are places visitors cannot go, forbidden chambers, sealed caverns where the mummies still rest, untouched, in the same salt that took them thousands of years ago. No one knows their names, no one knows their prayers, but their faces, serene and preserved, seem to whisper of a pact between man and earth, of an understanding we have forgotten. The priests of Hallstatt remind us that sometimes, immortality is not a gift but a consequence. They sought to preserve the world, and instead, the world preserved them. The salt that once symbolized life became their tomb, their monument, and their legacy. As you leave the tunnels and step back into the sunlight, the air tastes different, thinner, freer, yet you carry a piece of that silence with you. Because deep below, in the frozen breath of the mountain, they are still there, guardians of time, watching, waiting, glowing faintly in the eternal dark. The forgotten aqueducts of Petra. Beneath the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan, where the wind sings through canyons carved by time, lies a city built not by kings but by engineers who defied the desert itself. Petra, the jewel of the Nabatean world, carved straight into living rock, radiant at dawn and silent at dusk. But what truly made this city possible wasn't its temples or tombs, it was something far more invisible, far more miraculous. Beneath the stone facades and crumbling arches runs an ancient network of lifelines, the forgotten aqueducts of Petra, a water system so advanced that modern hydrologists still struggle to understand how it worked. In a land where rainfall is scarce and the heat devours all, the Nabateans built a city of fountains, a city that should not have existed. Imagine this. 2,000 years ago, traders crossing the Arabian desert would suddenly see it. Columns of red stone, stairways to the sky, and streams of water running through channels where there should have been only dust. It was said that Petra had been blessed by the gods, that water flowed there by divine will. But the truth was even more impressive. It was human genius. The Nabateans, masters of hydraulics, had carved more than just monuments into the mountains. They carved arteries. Water channels snaked across the cliffs, hidden in grooves, feeding reservoirs buried beneath courtyards. Rain from distant plateaus was captured, stored, and guided by gravity alone across miles of rock. They transformed desert rainfall into a living river, and from that a civilization was born. Archaeologists who first rediscovered these channels in the 20th century couldn't believe their precision. Some conduits were no wider than a hand's span, yet they carried water with an efficiency rivaling modern systems. Clay pipes sealed with lime plaster still cling to the rock faces today, their craftsmanship so delicate that a single break could have drained an entire reservoir. Yet these ancient builders knew how to prevent that. They placed relief pools, overflow systems, and even pressure regulators. They had somehow mastered the mathematics of flow centuries before Archimedes' principles were widely understood. How? No one knows. The Nabateans left behind no written manuals, no blueprints, only stone and silence. Deep within Petra's Sick, the narrow canyon that leads to the city's heart, you can still hear it, the faint whisper of dripping water. Look closely at the walls, and you'll see carved channels running along both sides. These weren't decorations, they were lifelines. During rare desert rains, these channels collected runoff from the surrounding cliffs, guiding it safely toward underground cisterns. Without them, flash floods would have destroyed Petra long before the Romans arrived. Every drop was precious, every groove deliberate. Engineers today estimate that the system could supply enough water for tens of thousands of people, even during years of drought. It was not just survival, it was abundance. The city had baths, fountains, and gardens. In the middle of the desert, Petra bloomed. And yet for centuries no one spoke of these aqueducts. Tourists came to see the treasury, the monastery, the facades of forgotten kings, but few ever looked down to where the true secret of Petra's endurance flowed unseen. When explorers in the 19th century mapped the city, They dismissed the channels as simple drainage. It wasn't until archaeologists from Jordan and Europe began using ground-penetrating radar that the full picture emerged, a sprawling, intelligent network of cisterns, pipelines, and hidden dams stretching beyond the city walls into the surrounding canyons. The Nabateans had mapped their landscape like a living organism, understanding every contour and vein. They didn't fight nature, they guided it. There's a moment when you stand on the high cliffs above the Sick, where you can see the system as they must have seen it, a masterpiece of balance. Stone gutters feeding channels, channels feeding tanks, tanks feeding life. Each one placed exactly where it needed to be. And yet the most haunting part of Petra's aqueducts isn't their brilliance, it's their silence. For somewhere around the 4th century AD, the system stopped, the channels dried, the fountains fell still, and the city began to fade back into the stone. Some say earthquakes shattered the conduits, others believe invaders cut the lines. But a few scholars whisper another theory, that the Nabateans themselves abandoned the system, sealing it intentionally, fearing that the water had turned sacred, untouchable. Inscriptions found near certain cisterns suggest the presence of rituals, prayers, even offerings made before water was drawn. To them, water was not merely a resource, it was divine memory, the tears of the mountain. When water vanished, it was as if the gods had turned their gaze away. The desert reclaimed what was borrowed. The aqueducts remained, half buried, winding like veins through stone hearts. And in their silence, they kept a story alive. A story of humans who turned the impossible into routine, who tamed one of the driest places on earth without steel, without machines, without even mortar in some places, just understanding. Today, as you walk through Petra's ruins, the sun burns high, and the air hums with heat. Tourists gather before the treasury's facade, unaware that beneath their feet lies a marvel equal to any monument above. Engineers who have studied the site call it a city built on water and illusion. The Nabateans used architecture not only to store water, but to shape perception. Their aqueducts were hidden within beauty, carved along decorative lines, disguised within columns and staircases. Even the treasury itself may have been positioned to conceal one of the main conduits leading from the canyon to the heart of the city. How did a civilization with no written treatises achieve such engineering mastery? Some theories suggest they inherited knowledge from earlier desert cultures, or perhaps developed it through centuries of experimentation. But one inscription, translated from Nabatean Aramaic, offers a poetic clue. The mountain teaches those who listen. They had learned to read the earth, to sense how it breathes, how it bleeds, how it drinks. In their humility, they achieved greatness. When the rains finally come to Petra, something magical happens. For a few brief hours, the ancient channels come alive. Water trickles through stone veins that haven't pulsed in centuries, whispering down pathways carved by hands long turned to dust. It's as if the city wakes for a moment, remembers. You can almost hear the echoes of workers singing as they guided water through the gates, the prayers of those who offered thanks before the first cup was drawn. And then, just as quickly, the sound fades. The desert takes its silence back. The aqueducts return to sleep. But they are still there, hidden beneath sand and time, waiting for those who know where to look. For in Petra, the real wonder isn't what stands in sunlight, it's what lies in shadow, unseen, but eternal. The forgotten aqueducts of Petra are more than a feat of engineering. They are a reminder that human civilization was never built by conquest alone, but by cooperation with nature, with landscape, with the rhythm of the earth itself. In the end, it wasn't the chisels or the hammers that made Petra immortal. It was water, and the people who learned how to make it flow where it should not have flowed. They turned desert into paradise, and paradise into legend. And even now, 2,000 years later, the mountain still holds their secret, patient, silent, and alive beneath the rose-red stone. The obsidian labyrinth of Kamanaljuard. Beneath the crowded heart of modern-day Guatemala City, buried under concrete, traffic, and centuries of silence, lies the memory of a forgotten metropolis, a city older than the Maya we know, older even than the legends carved in Copan or Tikal. Its name was Kamanaljuard, the Hill of the Dead. To most, it's just a collection of mounds scattered across a park, but to those who've studied its secrets, Kamanaljuard was once a place of astonishing power, a crossroads of trade, astronomy, and ritual. And beneath its vanished temples lies something stranger still. A hidden network of tunnels and chambers carved from black volcanic glass, what archaeologists now call the obsidian labyrinth. Imagine it, 2,000 years ago, the highlands of Guatemala were alive with smoke and color. Traders from the coast brought shells, jade, cacao, and feathers, climbing through the misty valleys to reach this mountain city. At the center of it all stood Kamanaljuard, a gleaming hub of pyramids and platforms, where rulers in red cloaks presided over markets that never slept. Yet it wasn't just a city of commerce. It was a city built upon an invisible sea of obsidian, the dark, glassy heart of volcanoes. Here, the earth itself supplied the sacred material that shaped their world: knives, mirrors, arrowheads, all forged from the volcanic glass they called the tears of the mountain. But sometime during the late pre-classic period, the people of Kamenaljord began to dig, deeper than any other civilization of their time. Beneath their plazas, beneath their temples, they carved passages through soft volcanic tuff, lining them with blocks of black obsidian, polished to a mirror sheen. The labyrinth stretched for hundreds of meters, a maze of glistening corridors where torchlight shimmered like liquid night. No one knows exactly why it was built. Some believe it was a ceremonial underworld, a man-made Xibalba, the mythic realm of the dead from Maya lore. Others think it was an astronomical observatory, designed to channel light into precise chambers during solstices and equinoxes. But whatever its purpose, the obsidian labyrinth was unlike anything found in Mesoamerica. Early explorers who entered the tunnels in the 1940s wrote of the overwhelming silence inside. The walls seemed to absorb sound, swallowing even the echoes of footsteps. As their lamps flickered, they saw carvings, strange figures etched into the black surfaces: serpents, jaguars, spirals, and eyes. Some glowed faintly under light, as if infused with mineral dust. Archaeologists later discovered that many of the carvings aligned with the cardinal directions, forming a kind of coded map that mirrored the stars. The labyrinth, it seemed, was both a physical space and a cosmic diagram, a journey into the earth that mirrored the journey of the sun beneath the horizon. Local legends tell of priests who entered the obsidian tunnels carrying bowls of burning copal, chanting to the gods of the underworld. They believed that the mirrored walls allowed them to see spirits, reflections not of themselves but of ancestors. To them, obsidian wasn't just stone, it was a portal. It could show what lay beyond life. One ancient text describes obsidian mirrors as the windows of the gods, and it's possible that Kamenaljuyu's labyrinth was an entire city built beneath the city, a world of reflections used to speak with the unseen. When archaeologists began excavating in the 20th century, they were stunned to find that many of the tunnels had been deliberately sealed. Huge slabs of volcanic stone blocked entrances. Inside, artifacts were left untouched: obsidian blades arranged in patterns, skeletons seated upright facing polished mirrors, offerings of maize, shells, and jade beads. Some skulls had traces of cinnabar, a bright red mercury mineral used in funerary rites. Radiocarbon dating placed these burials around 400 BCE, centuries before the rise of the great Maya cities. This meant that Kamenalju was already experimenting with architecture and ritual on a scale that foreshadowed an empire. But then, almost without warning, the labyrinth was abandoned. The tunnels were filled, the chambers sealed, and the surface city transformed into something new. Scholars still debate why. Did an eruption from the nearby volcanoes bury part of the complex? Was there a political or spiritual schism that forced the priesthood to close the gates of the underworld? Or did they believe the labyrinth had become too powerful, too dangerous to remain open? One theory, proposed by Guatemalan archaeologist Juan Antonio Valdés, suggests that the labyrinth wasn't just a temple, but a resonant structure, one that used the acoustics of obsidian to produce sound frequencies during rituals. Experiments in surviving chambers have shown that a single human voice can produce deep, echoing vibrations that seem to hum within the stone itself. Imagine a priest chanting in darkness, surrounded by mirrors. The sound of his voice multiplied until it feels as if the whole mountain were alive and breathing. To the ancient mind, that must have been the voice of the gods. And yet, what makes Kamenaljuyu so haunting isn't just what was found, it's what wasn't. The tunnels lead nowhere. Some end abruptly in blank walls, others twist back upon themselves. In one chamber, explorers discovered a massive obsidian disc set into the floor, perfectly polished, as if meant to reflect the ceiling. But the ceiling bore no carvings, no paintings, only smooth stone. Some believe the disc was meant to reflect the flame of a ritual fire, creating an illusion of infinite depth, a man-made portal to Xibalba. Others think it was used for scrying, a way for priests to see distant events, or to glimpse the movements of celestial bodies above. Whatever it was, its builders wanted secrecy. The deeper you go, the narrower the passages become, forcing intruders to crawl on hands and knees. It's as if the labyrinth itself rejects the unworthy. In modern times, most of Kamenaljuyu lies buried beneath the expanding city. Roads and houses now cover what was once the ceremonial core. Only a few mounds remain visible in the Kamenaljuyu Archaeological Park, silent reminders of a civilization that understood the earth better than we do. The labyrinth still exists, but only fragments have been explored. Some passages extend beneath modern neighborhoods, inaccessible, dangerous, or lost entirely. Locals speak of construction workers who break into sealed chambers and hear whispers echoing through the darkness, of tools that vanish overnight, of reflections appearing in obsidian shards that do not match the light in the room. It's tempting to dismiss these stories as myth, the echoes of old fears, but obsidian itself has always carried mystery. Scientists studying Mesoamerican artifacts have found that the glass can retain microscopic traces of heat and radiation, meaning that it literally records the energy of whatever it witnesses. When ancient people spoke of obsidian as living stone, perhaps they weren't entirely wrong. The labyrinth beneath Kamanal Yuwo may be less of a structure and more of a memory, a vault of reflections preserving the rituals of those who once walked its halls. Standing on the mounds today, you can feel the hum of the city around you, buses, markets, engines, and beneath it something quieter. The ground is uneven, heavy with ash and time. Somewhere below, the obsidian walls still glisten in total darkness, untouched for 2 millennia. A civilization built an underworld to speak to the gods, and now the descendants walk above it, unaware. Archaeologists say that Kamanal Yuwo was the spiritual heart of the southern Maya highlands, the place where sky and earth met. Its rulers were astronomers, engineers, and poets, people who saw no division between science and magic. The labyrinth to them was both. It was a physical experiment in light, sound, and spirit, a reminder that knowledge was sacred, and that the deeper one descended into darkness, the closer one came to truth. And so, the obsidian labyrinth of Kamanal Yuwo remains one of the great enigmas of the ancient Americas. Not a tomb, not a mine, not merely a temple, but something between worlds, a monument to reflection, both literal and symbolic. Its builders are gone, their names forgotten, their language fading into dust, yet the stone remembers. The black glass still catches stray light when uncovered, flashing like the eye of something vast, ancient and waiting. Perhaps one day the full labyrinth will be mapped, its secrets decoded, or perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Some doors are not meant to open twice. In the end, Kamanal Yuwo teaches us what every great civilization eventually learns, that power lies not in what we build, but in what we bury. The obsidian tunnels still twist beneath the city, silent and sealed, holding their reflections close. And in those reflections, maybe, the past still looks back. The wind-carved temples of Alula. In the golden heart of the Arabian desert, where the wind hums across endless stone and time moves like drifting sand, lies a valley unlike any other on earth. This is Alula, an ancient landscape sculpted not by men alone, but by the wind itself, a place where temples rise from cliffs carved with such precision and purpose that even today, their meaning remains half buried in silence. To wander through Alula is to step into a mirage that has somehow turned solid, where every rock face whispers a secret from an age when gods were made of sand and stone could breathe. Long before skyscrapers and oil wells, before cities lit up the desert night, this valley was a crossroads of civilizations. Nabateans, Lihianites, Dadanites, names mostly forgotten, but once mighty enough to carve kingdoms into the bones of Arabia. The wind carved the land, and the people carved themselves into eternity. Here 2,000 years ago, they shaped mountains into temples, tombs, and sanctuaries, so vast and symmetrical that even now, satellites tracing their lines find geometry too precise for erosion to explain. The ancients called this place Hegra, the sister city of Petra, and in its cliffs, they left behind hundreds of facades, doorways, and sanctuaries that seem to grow straight from the earth itself. As the sun rises, Alula comes alive in color, golds turning to crimson, shadows spilling down the cliff walls like water. And there, among the sandstone towers, the temples stand quiet, not built, but revealed. To the untrained eye they look like architecture, but archaeologists who have studied their weathered lines say these structures are something different. They were sculpted with the patience of nature itself, using a combination of human hands and desert wind. The ancients, it seems, understood how to work with erosion, how to chisel where the wind had already begun its art. It's said that the artisans of Alula could listen to the rock and feel which parts would crumble and which would last for millennia. In the cliffs of Jabal Ikma, walls are covered with inscriptions, thousands of them, like an open-air library. Prayers, trade records, and names of forgotten kings mark the surface, carved with a precision that survives even after 2,500 years. Yet among them are symbols that do not fit any known alphabet, spirals, solar disks, and geometric shapes carved deep into the stone, as if they were meant not to be read, but heard. Some archaeologists believe these were part of a forgotten ritual language, one that connected the vibrations of sound and wind to the worship of the elements, because here, wind was more than a force, it was divine. The temples of Alula were not made from imported materials or grand foundations. They were the foundations, the mountain itself transformed into a living monument. Step inside one of these chambers, and the air changes. The acoustics are unlike anything else in the ancient world. A whisper can carry for meters, swirling softly before vanishing into the rock. Scholars have begun to wonder whether these natural amplifications were intentional, whether these hollowed sanctuaries were built as instruments of sound to amplify chants, hymns, or the voice of the wind. Ancient records from the nearby kingdom of Dadan speak of priests who listened to the breath of the mountain, claiming that divine answers came not in visions but in echoes. But the most haunting part of Alula is what the desert hides. Beneath the carved facades lie tunnels, some natural, others unmistakably shaped by human tools. Archaeologists mapping these passages found that they aligned with celestial patterns, entrances pointing to the solstices, shafts opening directly toward the star Canopus, the same star once used by Egyptian sailors to navigate the Red Sea. Could it be that the builders of Alula were astronomers as much as masons, using stone and wind as a calendar, marking time itself into the desert? In 2019, researchers using ground-penetrating radar discovered cavities beneath some of the largest temples. Inside one, they found traces of pottery and soot, along with tiny fragments of polished quartz and bronze. But the most striking discovery was a single carved pillar, hidden from view, its surface perfectly smooth, not eroded, not worn, as if untouched by air. It was oriented toward the northwest, facing the direction of Petra. Some believe it was a link between the two cities, a symbolic connection between twin civilizations that shared not only trade routes but spiritual ones. To understand Alula, one must think in the language of sand, in centuries instead of years. The wind that carves these temples is the same that has passed for thousands of lifetimes. Each gust, each grain, reshapes what the ancients left behind. And yet, despite erosion, despite earthquakes and storms, the facades remain. Their edges still crisp, their doorways still perfect rectangles cut into cliffs. It's as if something has been preserving them, or guarding them. Local legends tell of the Jinn of the Wind, ancient spirits said to dwell within the temples. Travelers once swore that when they camped near the cliffs, they could hear flutes playing at night, though no one was there. Others spoke of the stones humming faintly, after sunset, as if the wind itself was trapped inside. When Bedouin tribes rediscovered the ruins centuries ago, they avoided them, calling them Madun al-Jinn, the cities of spirits. Even now, the name remains a whisper of fear and reverence. To them, these were not human creations, but the homes of beings older than mankind. Scientists, of course, offer another view. The carvings, they say, were made with iron chisels, and the acoustics are natural. But even modern geology can't explain the remarkable preservation. The wind erosion that should have destroyed these delicate facades over centuries somehow didn't. Measurements show that in many areas, the rock has hardened unnaturally, the outer layer transformed into a kind of protective shell. Was it some ancient chemical process? Or did the desert itself decide to keep its monuments intact? Walking through Alula at dusk is like stepping into a dream carved in stone. The last light of the day paints the cliffs in deep orange, and for a moment, it's easy to imagine the city alive again. Priests lighting fires in the temple recesses, voices rising in hymns, travelers arriving on camels with incense and salt, the air filled with the mingling scent of wind and earth. The architecture speaks of both human genius and geological patience, a collaboration between nature and civilization. Perhaps that's why Alula feels so different from other ruins. It's not just a place that was built, it's a place that was born. Recent excavations have revealed small altars carved into the rock inside the temples, coated with soot and mineral residue. Some even contain traces of myrrh, frankincense, and salt, ingredients used in purification rituals. One chamber, hidden deep in the cliffs, holds a carved relief, showing a figure standing between two swirling spirals, possibly a depiction of the god Du-Shara, the Nabatean deity of storms and mountains. The spirals, remarkably, align with ancient representations of wind in Near Eastern art. Could it be that Alula's temples were dedicated not to the sun or stars, but to the wind itself, to the unseen sculptor that shaped their world? There is an undeniable poetry to that idea, that humans built temples to honor the force that carved them, that every breeze through those chambers was a prayer answered. And when the desert storms came, they were not feared but welcomed, for they renewed the divine architecture, reshaping the sacred faces of stone. As night falls over Alula, silence returns, vast, heavy, and absolute. The stars emerge, bright and infinite, and the valley cools. Beneath the moonlight, the temples shimmer faintly, their edges glowing silver against the dark sky. And as the wind moves once more through the narrow corridors and hollowed sanctuaries, you can almost hear the voice of the ancients, the same whisper that has echoed for millennia. Remember us. We carved with the wind. The wind-carved temples of Alula are more than ruins. They are a dialogue between humanity and nature, an unfinished poem written in sand and time. Every pillar, every hollow, every echo still holds a question we cannot fully answer. How much of this place was carved by man, and how much by the hand of the desert itself? Perhaps it doesn't matter. In Alula, there is no boundary between the two. The wind was their god, the desert their cathedral, and their memory. It still drifts across the dunes in every gust that sings through the stones. The sunken tombs of Pavlopatri. Beneath the turquoise waters off the southern coast of Greece, a ghost city lies still. Its streets, walls, and tombs sleeping beneath the waves. The locals call it Pavlopatri, but its true name was lost to time. The sea swallowed it over 5,000 years ago. Yet the ruins remain almost perfectly preserved, an entire world frozen under glass. This is not myth or legend. This is the oldest known underwater city on Earth, and deep within its sunken avenues, divers have found something even stranger. Tombs carved with an understanding of death and rebirth that predates every written Greek myth. The tombs of Pavlopatri are not just graves, they are a message, written in stone and sea. When the first archaeologists dove here in 1967, they expected scattered stones, maybe fragments of walls. What they found instead were paved streets, courtyards, stairways, and chambered graves still intact. Beneath the shimmering light, the layout looked eerily familiar, almost modern. Entire city blocks were visible through the clear Aegean water. Pavlopatri, they realized, was not a fishing village, but a thriving coastal city from the Bronze Age, older than the Minoans, older even than Mycenae. It was a civilization that had mastered trade, architecture, and burial rituals long before history began recording names. The deeper divers went, the stranger it became. Many of the tombs were shaped like small houses, with walls, entryways, and floors made of stone slabs. Inside, there were no bodies left, only faint traces of pigment, shards of pottery, and mysterious symbols carved into the walls, circles, lines, and spirals, arranged with mathematical precision. These were not random decorations. The patterns mirrored celestial alignments, matching the positions of the sun at solstice and the stars that guided sailors across the Aegean. The tombs, it seemed, were more than resting places. They were star maps, designed to send the dead not downward, but upward, into the cosmos. For centuries, Greek fishermen spoke of ruins glimpsed beneath the waves on calm days, when the sea turned clear as glass. They said the city would rise again when the world was ready to hear its story. Today, with advanced sonar and 3D mapping, we can finally see what they saw, an entire sunken city that once thrived above water. But how did it end up beneath the sea? Scientists say rising sea levels after 1000 BCE slowly consumed it. Others suggest a massive earthquake pulled the land down in a single night. Local legend tells of a great curse, a city that defied the gods and was drowned as punishment. Whichever story is true, the sea has preserved what time could not. Walking, or rather, swimming through Pavlopatri feels like drifting through memory itself. The roads are still there, paved with flat stones leading to courtyards where families once gathered. Pottery fragments still lie where they fell, but in certain areas, divers report something peculiar. Faint carvings that glow slightly under flashlight beams, as if made with a different kind of stone. When archaeologists examined them, they found traces of mineral crystals not native to the region, suggesting that some materials were imported from distant lands, possibly Egypt or Crete. What could these ancient builders have needed such rare stones for? Then came the most haunting discovery, the sunken tombs. Buried within coral and sand, some sealed chambers were found under layers of sediment. When researchers opened one of them, they found a perfectly smooth floor made from limestone blocks, and at the center, a shallow basin carved in a spiral. The spiral was etched with such accuracy that it matched the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical ratio found in shells, plants, and galaxies. Whoever carved it understood geometry beyond simple ornamentation. Some experts believe it symbolized the cycle of life, a visual prayer for the soul's journey. Others whisper that it represented the path of the sun, a cosmic key for resurrection. In another chamber, divers found small clay figurines, half human, half bird shapes, with wide eyes and folded wings. The artistry was ancient but deliberate. Similar symbols appear in early Cycladic culture, linked to deities of transformation and flight, guardians of the threshold between worlds. Could the people of Pavlopatri have believed that the dead transformed into something celestial, that their tombs were vessels, guiding spirits into the wind? When underwater archaeologists scanned the entire site using high-frequency sonar, they noticed that the main tombs were arranged in a grid, not random, but aligned with both the coastline and the sunrise of midsummer. The pattern seemed intentional, as if the entire necropolis had been mapped to follow the horizon. It hinted at an ancient cosmology, a belief that death and the sea were part of the same eternal rhythm. Each tomb pointed toward the dawn, the direction of rebirth. Every burial faced the rising sun, not the setting one. They buried their dead not in shadow, but in hope. And yet one tomb broke the pattern, hidden deeper and half collapsed. Its orientation faced the open ocean, west, not east. When divers entered it, they found no carvings, no figurines, only a single smooth stone pillar in the center. The pillar bore faint circular grooves, like a sundial, but underwater it could not have served any practical purpose. Some researchers now believe it was the tomb of the navigator, a symbolic grave for the first explorer who crossed the sea. The grooves, they say, represented the passage of stars, a celestial compass preserved in stone. The question remains, who were these people? No written records survive, no royal names, no tablets, no kings. All that's left are stones and the echoes of their design. But in those stones there's intelligence, an understanding of the natural world, of mathematics and astronomy, far ahead of their time. They may have been a forgotten link between early Aegean civilizations, traders who sailed across the Mediterranean, connecting cultures long before history began. Pavlopetri may have been their capital, their sacred harbor, their final resting place. As the sea currents drift over the ruins, silt stirs and falls like snow. Through the water, the sunlight ripples across the tombs, and for a fleeting moment, it looks like life is moving again beneath the waves. Fish swim through doorways once meant for the dead. Corals have claimed the walls, turning the city into a living reef. Life has returned in another form. Perhaps that is exactly what the people of Pavlopetri believed, that death was not an ending, but a transformation. The sea didn't destroy their world. It preserved it. Some divers claim that on calm days, when the sun is high and the waves silent, you can hear faint sounds beneath the surface, a low hum, like chanting. Scientists call it acoustic resonance from water currents passing through stone corridors. But local fishermen still say it's the city singing, the drowned voices of its ancestors echoing through the sea. And when night falls, under moonlight, the sea around Pavlopetri turns silver. From above, the outlines of its streets glow faintly through the water, the map of a vanished world still visible, still waiting. The tombs, too, shimmer quietly below, keeping their vigil. Thousands of years have passed, empires have risen and fallen, and yet here it remains, a city of the dead, perfectly preserved, perfectly silent, beneath the eternal tide. Perhaps that's the true story of Pavlopetri, not a tragedy of drowning, but a triumph of endurance. The people who built it knew the sea could take everything, yet they built anyway, not against the water, but with it. They shaped their world knowing that one day it might sink, trusting that their dead would still find their way home. And maybe they were right. For in the stillness beneath the Aegean, their city still breathes. The tombs of Pavlopetri remain open to the sea, the waves moving gently in and out like the rhythm of a sleeping heart, the heart of an ancient civilization that refused to disappear. So the next time you stand at the shore and look down into the blue, remember, just beyond the waves lies a city that time forgot, and beneath those waters rest the tombs of the first dreamers who dared to map eternity in stone. The cave temples of Phouentong. In the heart of Myanmar, far from the rush of cities and the noise of modern life, there lies a place carved not by nature alone, but by devotion, by patience, and by hands guided by faith over 1,000 years ago. It is called Phouentong, which means mountain of isolated meditation. From the outside, it looks like a ridge of soft sandstone cliffs, weathered and ordinary. But step closer, and the mountain opens like a secret, revealing hundreds of man-made caves, each one hollowed by monks and artists who turned rock into sanctuaries of light and silence. Inside these caves, thousands of Buddhas sit in eternal stillness, their eyes half closed, as if watching over a forgotten world. Phouentong is not just one temple, it is a network of over 900 caves, stretching across the hills near Moniwa, each chamber hand-carved into the stone. Some are no larger than a small room, others vast enough to hold entire congregations. The air inside is cool, still, and heavy with the scent of earth and incense. And on every wall, ceiling, and column, paintings bloom, swirling reds, golds, and blacks forming scenes from ancient Buddhist tales, the Jataka stories that tell of the Buddha's past lives. These murals are centuries old, yet their colors remain vivid, untouched by time. No sunlight reaches them, and perhaps that is why they have survived, hidden in eternal twilight, protected by shadow. For centuries, travelers who reached Phouentong spoke of its silence, a silence so deep it seemed alive. They said you could hear your heartbeat echoing against the stone. But that silence is deceptive. The walls themselves speak if you know how to listen. Every carving, every brushstroke tells a story, not of kings or battles, but of enlightenment, of patience, of an ancient people's search for peace in a turbulent world. Scholars believe the caves were created between the 14th and 18th centuries, though some signs hint at even older origins. A few of the lower chambers show early architectural styles similar to the Piu and Bagan periods, which would push the origins back nearly 1,000 years earlier. The truth, like the caves themselves, lies buried beneath layers of devotion and time. When archaeologists first began to study Phouentong properly in the late 20th century, they were stunned by its complexity. Each cave seemed to have a purpose, a ritual sequence, an order of spiritual progression. The first chambers near the entrance are simple, bare walls, a single Buddha image carved directly from the stone. But as one goes deeper into the hillside, the carvings grow more elaborate. Entire walls become seas of Buddhas, hundreds upon hundreds, arranged in geometric perfection, each one slightly different in expression or posture. It's said that no two faces are exactly alike. Deeper still, the murals become more symbolic, filled with celestial beings, lotus flowers, and golden wheels of Dharma. It is as if the deeper you walk, the closer you move toward enlightenment itself. There's something almost otherworldly about the way light behaves inside Fawintong. Narrow shafts of daylight slip through small openings, painting halos across the statues. Dust drifts through these beams like golden snow. In some chambers, the only illumination comes from a monk's candle, its flicker reflecting off thousands of painted eyes. For a moment, it feels as if the walls are watching you, not with judgment, but with quiet understanding, as though they've seen countless lifetimes pass, and they know yours will too. Local legends say the caves were not merely temples, but also gateways of protection. Long ago, a great sage dreamt that this mountain would guard the teachings of the Buddha through the dark ages, when war and ignorance would sweep the land. So monks began carving, not for themselves, but for the future. They worked generation after generation, adding chamber after chamber, so that no matter what happened above, the truth would survive below. Hidden in stone, one of the most mysterious chambers lies deep in the southern section of the complex, a vast domed hall known as the Cave of the Thousand Eyes. Inside, the walls are covered with rows of tiny carved Buddhas, each the size of a hand, staring outward. When torches were first lit here by explorers, the light bounced across the figures, making it seem as though the cave was alive, 1,000 eyes gleaming from the dark. At the center sits a single enormous Buddha, serene and still, carved from the living rock. His eyes seem to follow every movement, his lips curved in the faintest smile. Some locals say that if you stay here long enough in silence, you can hear chanting from deep within the stone. Archaeologists have tried to map the entire complex, but Fawintong resists complete understanding. There are tunnels that lead nowhere, chambers that spiral downward and stop abruptly, and walls that echo strangely when you speak near them. Some researchers believe these acoustic effects were deliberate, that the caves were designed to resonate with chanting, amplifying the monks' voices into a single harmonic vibration. In ancient Buddhist ritual, sound was not just prayer, it was a bridge between the human and the divine. In these caves, that bridge still hums faintly when the wind blows through the narrow openings. But perhaps the most haunting thing about Fawintong is what lies outside it, a vast, sun-baked plain scattered with hundreds of weathered stupas. Each stupa marks the ashes of an unknown monk, a silent testament to generations who came here to meditate and never left. Some are cracked and hollow, others perfectly intact, their bell shapes glowing gold in the setting sun. As evening falls, shadows stretch from the stupas toward the cave entrances, as if the land itself is bowing to the mountain. The sound of distant bells drifts across the wind, the same sound that's been heard here for centuries. There is one story that villagers still tell, passed down quietly from monk to monk. They say that deep within one of the sealed caves lies a hidden shrine, untouched since it was sealed by its creators. According to legend, the monks who carved it placed inside not gold or relics, but a scroll of prophecy, a text said to reveal the cycle of ages, predicting when the teachings would fade, and when they would rise again. The cave was sealed with stone and hidden among the others. To this day, no one knows which one it is. Some claim that attempts to find it always end the same way, with sudden storms, collapsing rock, or the inexplicable sound of footsteps in the dark. The monks, they say, still protect their secret. Modern explorers who visit Fawintong often describe the same experience. Time slows. The air feels thicker, heavier, the walls seem to breathe. Even cameras struggle to capture the real color of the murals. They shift in tone depending on the angle of the light, sometimes red, sometimes gold, sometimes deep black like the void. It's as though the paintings themselves are alive, responding to the moment, never fully revealing themselves. And yet, beneath the layers of mystery, there is something deeply human about this place. Every carving was made by hand, by someone who lived, breathed, and believed. Imagine the patience it took to chisel each Buddha, to mix natural pigments from minerals and plants, to paint by torchlight inside narrow chambers for years. This was not work done in haste. It was a lifetime's devotion turned into art, art that has survived empires, wars, and the slow erosion of time. When the rains come, water flows down the hillsides, dripping into the cave mouths like tears. The sandstone darkens, the murals glisten, and for a brief moment, it looks as if the mountain itself is alive, breathing in rhythm with the world. At dawn, mist rises over the valley, curling around the stupas like smoke. Birds nest in the cracks, their songs echoing softly through the halls. And somewhere deep inside, a monk lights a candle, bows, and begins to chant, just as his predecessors did centuries ago. The sound fills the chambers, traveling through the stone, vibrating in harmony with the ancient carvings. Fawintong is not a ruin, it is a living memory, a heartbeat of faith carved into the earth. And even though time continues to move, the caves remain still, holding their secrets. They remind us that silence is not emptiness, it's presence. That darkness can hold more truth than light, and that devotion, when carved into stone, can outlast even the ages. So if you ever find yourself in northern Myanmar standing before the silent cliffs of Phouintang, take a breath and listen. The mountain may not speak in words, but its silence carries centuries of prayer. The walls will whisper if you're still enough to hear them. And in that moment, beneath the weight of 1,000 Buddhas, you may feel what the monks of old once felt. That peace is not found in the world outside, but in the quiet that waits within. The desert glyphs of Shuwamis. In the vast emptiness of northwestern Saudi Arabia, where the desert stretches unbroken to the horizon and the silence feels eternal, there lies a place that speaks without words, a place where the stones themselves tell stories. It is called Shuwamis. From a distance, it appears as nothing more than a series of rugged cliffs rising from the sand like ancient bones. But as you draw near, the surfaces of those cliffs begin to shimmer in the sunlight, not with gold or crystal, but with images. Thousands upon thousands of petroglyphs, carved by hand into the dark desert varnish, their lines etched with precision that defies their age. Here, in one of the driest regions on Earth, an entire world of lost history has been engraved onto stone, a prehistoric gallery that has outlived every kingdom that ever ruled these sands. Long before Arabia had cities, before it had roads or names, humans gathered here, at Shuwamis, and left behind their stories. When you first stand before the rock faces, you see figures, tall, slender humans with elongated limbs, surrounded by animals, camels, oryx, ibex, lions, even dogs. Some of the carvings show hunters with bows drawn, dogs running beside them in perfect synchronization. Others depict processions, rituals, scenes of birth and death, of dancing and worship. These are not random markings, they are moments captured in stone, fragments of memory that survived when everything else turned to dust. Archaeologists date the oldest of these carvings to more than 10,000 years ago, perhaps even older. They were made when this region was not a desert at all, but a savanna, green and alive, filled with rivers, lakes, and herds of animals that no longer roam these lands. The people who carved these glyphs lived in that fertile world, and their art preserved its image long after the sands took over. Some experts believe that Shuwamis holds one of the oldest continuous records of human expression anywhere on Earth. What's most striking is the detail. The artists who carved these figures understood anatomy, motion, and proportion, a camel's posture mid-run, a hunter's grip on a bowstring, the way a dog's tail curls. Every line feels deliberate. They used nothing but stone tools, yet their carvings remain sharp, clean, and elegant. When the sunlight shifts, shadows fall across the figures, and they seem to move, as if the hunters are still chasing their prey, frozen between worlds of time. But Shuwamis is more than ancient art, it's a message. Across the desert cliffs, you find layers of carvings from different eras, one generation engraving over another. The earliest, drawn with thick, deep lines, show wild animals and humans living in harmony. Later carvings from around 5,000 years ago begin to show domesticated camels, herders, and weapons. The story of human evolution is literally written across the rock, from hunter to herder, from wanderer to settler. It is the story of how civilization began, told not through words but through symbols that still survive the wind. When researchers began to study the Shuwamis carvings in the early 2000s, they were stunned to discover patterns, alignments between the figures and the sun. Some panels are illuminated only during certain times of year, as if intentionally placed to mark seasonal cycles. The hunting scenes, for instance, glow brightest at dawn during the winter solstice. Could it be that these ancient artists were not only storytellers but early astronomers, carving calendars into the cliffs to track time, migration, and the rhythm of life itself? Local Bedouins who roamed these lands long before archaeologists arrived had their own legends. They spoke of the talking stones, rocks that whispered at night, carrying the voices of ancestors who once lived in the green age of the desert. Some claimed that if you camped near the cliffs in silence, you could hear the sound of drums echoing from the past, faint but rhythmic, carried by the wind through the canyons. It was said that these carvings were not just memories but guardians, spiritual records meant to protect the desert's soul. Among the most mysterious carvings is a panel showing humanoid figures with circular halos around their heads, standing over reclining animals. Their proportions are strange, neither fully human nor entirely divine. Scholars debate their meaning. Some say they represent early gods or shamans in trance. Others believe they depict ancestors watching over the living. A few fringe theorists even suggest extraterrestrial symbolism, though most archaeologists interpret them as part of ancient spiritual rituals, the first visual prayers carved into earth itself. There are also unexplained anomalies. Some carvings show animals that never lived in Arabia, elephants, long-horned cattle, even a few that resemble extinct species known only from African fossils. Could this be artistic imagination? Or does it hint at an ancient connection between Arabia and Africa, when early humans migrated through this region following rivers that are now buried beneath the desert? Satellite imaging has revealed dry riverbeds stretching for hundreds of kilometers, ancient lifelines that once connected these people to distant lands. The petroglyphs may be the last witnesses of that forgotten world. At dusk, Shuemis changes. As the sun sinks below the cliffs, the light fades, and the carvings begin to vanish, one by one, until only the faintest outlines remain. The silence deepens, and the air cools. It's then that you realize something profound. These glyphs were meant to be seen alive, in the shifting light of the day. They were never static art, they were performances of shadow and stone, living scenes that changed with the movement of the sun. In that sense, the desert itself is part of the artwork, the endless sky, the whispering wind, the heartbeat of time. When UNESCO declared Shuems a World Heritage Site in 2015, they called it one of the greatest archives of early human creativity ever discovered. But for the local tribes, it had always been sacred. They still avoid touching the carvings out of respect. To them, these are not relics of the past, they are part of a living continuum. The people who carved them were their ancestors, and the stones that hold their images are alive, breathing the desert's eternal rhythm. One particularly famous scene, often called the Hunter's Procession, stretches over 10 meters of rock. It shows a line of hunters moving in perfect formation, each one unique in posture, accompanied by dogs whose ears and tails are drawn in loving detail. The lead figure appears to carry a staff or spear, possibly a symbol of leadership or ritual. What makes the scene haunting is its balance. Every figure positioned with mathematical precision, as if the artist understood symmetry intuitively. It's not primitive, it's poetic. The more scientists study these carvings, the more questions arise. How did people survive here thousands of years ago? Where did they find water, food, shelter? Excavations nearby have uncovered the remains of hearths, stone tools, and animal bones, traces of life beside what were once freshwater streams. Climate records confirm that this region was once fertile, dotted with lakes. Then something changed. The Earth's orbit shifted, rainfall decreased, and the savannas turned to sand. The people who lived here watched their world disappear, and perhaps as they prepared to leave, they carved their memories into stone, a farewell to the land they loved, ensuring it would not be forgotten. In many ways, Shuemis is a mirror, not just of ancient life, but of us. It reminds us that humanity has always sought to leave a mark, to communicate across time. Long before books, cities, or the internet, there were these carvings, silent messages to whoever would come next. And now we are the ones standing before them, trying to understand their meaning. As the wind sweeps through the valley, dust dances in the golden light. The carved hunters seem to move again, their dogs sprinting alongside them through eternity. The cliffs glow for a moment, then fade back into shadow. Shuemis falls silent once more, patient, timeless, waiting for the next traveler to listen. In the end, perhaps that's what these glyphs were meant to do, not to explain, but to remind us. To remind us that even in the harshest places, the human spirit finds a way to create, to tell stories, to reach beyond death. The people of Shuemis are gone, their voices lost, but their art endures, etched into the bones of the desert, whispering across 10,000 years. And if you ever find yourself standing there, beneath the endless Arabian sky, you may feel it too, that faint pulse of connection between past and present, a heartbeat in the rock, a message in the sand. The ancient voice of Shuemis, still speaking, after all this time. The ice-marked bones of Yana RHS. Far beyond the reach of cities, beyond the edge of forests and the last traces of roads, lies one of the most remote places on Earth, the Siberian Arctic. For most of the year, it is a world of silence and frost. The wind moves like a blade across endless white plains, and the ground, frozen for tens of thousands of years, hides secrets older than civilization itself. And deep within this frozen wilderness, along the banks of a river called Yana, something extraordinary was found. A window into a forgotten chapter of humanity. The place is known as Yana RHS, short for Rhinoceros Horn Site. At first glance, it doesn't look like much, just an eroded riverbank on the Yana River, some 700 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. But beneath the permafrost, buried under layers of ice and silt, archaeologists uncovered bones, hundreds of them, scattered, shattered, and stained by time. Mammoth tusks, reindeer antlers, horse bones, and among them unmistakably, human ones, carved, marked, and etched with patterns that no animal could make. The people who left these behind lived here more than 31,000 years ago, in a world colder than anything we can imagine. Before Yana RHS was discovered, no one believed humans had ventured that far north during the Ice Age. The textbooks said it was impossible. The cold would have been unbearable, the land barren, the winters endless. But when the excavation began in the early 2000s, layer by layer, the truth emerged. Not only did people live here, they thrived. They hunted, crafted tools, built shelters, and created art, all on the frozen edge of the world. The first thing the scientists noticed were the marks. Thin, deliberate carvings etched into bones and ivory. Spirals, crosshatches, chevrons. Patterns that looked almost mathematical. Some bones were shaped into needles and awls, others into ornaments or beads. One mammoth tusk was carved with symmetrical lines so precise it looked like a modern engraving, and when radiocarbon testing confirmed the age 31 millennia old, it rewrote everything we knew about human resilience and creativity. The most haunting discoveries were the human remains. 2 small milk teeth, belonging to children who once lived and died here. DNA extracted from those teeth told a story no one expected. These children were members of a distinct lineage, separate from both European and East Asian populations, a people scientists now call the ancient North Siberians, one of the earliest known human groups to survive in the Arctic. Their genes, researchers later found, live on faintly today in Native American populations, suggesting that the first humans to cross into the Americas may have been their descendants. Imagine their world, endless twilight, where the sun hovers low on the horizon even at noon, the temperature plunging to 40 below zero. Yet these people built homes out of mammoth bones, stacking tusks and ribs into domes covered with hides. They burned bone and fat for light and heat, and they hunted the great beasts of the Ice Age, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, reindeer, with weapons made from the very materials those animals provided. Every day was a fight against the elements, but their art tells a different story, one of beauty and meaning. Among the finds at Yana RHS were tiny figurines, stylized animals carved from ivory, each with delicate detail. One depicts a bird in flight, another, a crouching mammoth. These were not mere decorations, they were symbols, perhaps totems, perhaps prayers, reflections of a spiritual life thriving amid the cold. Some objects bore red ochre, the pigment of ritual. Others were polished smooth, as if carried often, touched for comfort. Then came one of the most mysterious artifacts, a set of engraved bone discs, each with a series of dots and lines. Some researchers think they could represent a lunar calendar, evidence of early astronomy in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Others see them as counting tokens, used to track hunts or herds. Whatever their purpose, they show that these people observed patterns, in the sky, in the seasons, in the world around them. They were scientists in their own way, mapping the rhythm of survival. The bones of the animals themselves tell another layer of the story. Many show deep cuts, some spiral fractures, signs of deliberate butchering to extract marrow and fat. But others have markings unlike anything seen before, parallel grooves and spiral scratches, carved after death, perhaps as ritual symbols. One mammoth skull bears a cross-shaped engraving near the temple, made with precision. Was it a mark of respect, a way of releasing the animal's spirit, or something deeper, a symbol tied to belief, lost in the fog of prehistory? As the team excavated deeper, they found traces of hearths, blackened ash preserved by ice. Inside them were fragments of burned bone and charcoal, still carrying the scent of ancient fires when thawed. Those fires burned more than 30 millennia ago, yet the moment felt immediate, as if the family who built them had just stepped away. One hearth contained a cluster of tools, half-finished, abandoned mid-work. Another, a necklace made of pierced fox teeth, strung together with sinew that turned to dust the moment it saw air. Each find was intimate, not a monument, not a ruin, but a glimpse of daily life, frozen in place. The climate at that time was unforgiving. During the last glacial maximum, Siberia was a cold desert, windswept, treeless, and silent, yet water from the Yana River provided life, attracting animals in great numbers. It was here that the ancient North Siberians built their world, hunters, craftsmen, parents, storytellers, surviving not just through strength but through ingenuity. The ice preserved not only their tools and bones but also their intentions, their artistry, their culture, their humanity. When scientists analyzed the DNA of the animals found at the site, they discovered something remarkable. These people were selective hunters. They targeted young mammoths and reindeer, not just for food but for material. Ivory was their resource, their canvas. It became weapons, jewelry, and instruments of survival. Some tusks were carved into long, polished rods that might have been ceremonial staffs or measuring tools. Others were shaped into delicate figurines that still gleam faintly under light after thousands of years. The work was not random. It was deliberate, skilled, and deeply symbolic. There is one carving that still puzzles researchers, a curved piece of mammoth ivory, etched with a series of wave-like patterns. To some, it resembles flowing water. To others, a map. Could it represent the river itself, the lifeline of their world? If so, it would be one of the earliest maps ever made, a human attempt to understand and record geography long before writing existed. But perhaps the most haunting part of Yana RHS is what lies beneath its surface. Not just the bones and artifacts, but the climate memory trapped in the permafrost. By studying ancient pollen and isotopes, scientists reconstructed the environment of that time. It wasn't a frozen wasteland, but a fragile ecosystem. Tundra mixed with grasslands, teeming with life. The ancient North Siberians adapted perfectly to it, but when the ice advanced and temperatures dropped further, the land changed. Slowly the site was abandoned. The fires went out. The wind buried the shelters in snow. The people moved on, perhaps eastward, following the mammoths, perhaps across the land bridge into the Americas. And then, silence. For 30,000 years, when the site was rediscovered, that silence was broken. As excavators brushed away the frozen soil, they held in their hands objects that had not seen light since the Ice Age, tools that still fit perfectly in the human palm, as if waiting for their makers to return. Each item seemed to whisper a single truth. We were here, in the quiet of the Arctic night, surrounded by the glow of the aurora. You can almost imagine them gathered around their fires, wrapped in furs, carving shapes into bone as the northern lights ripple above. Their world may seem alien, but their hopes, fears, and dreams were our own. They too loved, created, mourned, and told stories to their children about the spirits of the animals they hunted. The ice-marked bones of Yana RHS remind us that humanity's story is far older and far more resilient than we once thought. Against impossible odds, people not only survived the Ice Age, they left behind proof of who they were. In their carvings and tools we see not just survival, but imagination. Not just endurance, but expression. And perhaps that's the greatest message frozen in the Yana permafrost, that no matter how cold, how remote, or how hopeless the world may seem, the spark of creativity, the urge to make, to remember, to leave a mark, never fades. It endures, waiting beneath the ice, until someone digs deep enough to find it again. The cave altars of Chislehurst. Beneath the quiet suburbs of southeast London lies a world that most people will never see. A world carved not by nature, but by human hands. A labyrinth stretching for more than 20 miles, silent, cold, and filled with echoes of an age when candles were the only light. These are the Chislehurst Caves, an underground network older than recorded memory, and inside their darkness, archaeologists have uncovered something that shouldn't exist here. Ancient altars carved from chalk and flint, offerings of bones, melted wax, and primitive carvings that hint at worship far older than Christianity. And no one truly knows who built them, or why. The caves, by themselves, are already a puzzle. Dug deep into the earth beneath Kent, their tunnels twist like veins, sometimes narrowing into crawl spaces, sometimes expanding into caverns big enough to hold hundreds of people. Over centuries, they've been reused again and again by Druids, Romans, smugglers, soldiers, and bomb refugees. Yet every group left behind traces, torch marks, graffiti, carvings, altars. But deep in the oldest section, where the air grows heavy and the walls are blackened with soot, explorers found something different. Stone tables, arranged with deliberate geometry, and carved symbols that don't belong to any known script. This was not a mine, it was a sanctuary. Local legend says the first tunnels were carved by prehistoric tribes, long before the Romans ever reached Britain. Some researchers claim the soft chalk allowed easy excavation using antler picks and flint tools, but the pattern of the chambers, perfect symmetry, deliberate direction suggests more than simple mining. The placement of altars, each aligned roughly east to west, seems to imitate solar paths, hinting at rituals linked to light and darkness, life and death. The cave becomes a calendar, a temple where the rising sun never enters, but its cycle was still worshipped. When early antiquarians first descended here in the 19th century, they found candles still sitting on stone ledges, melted into strange shapes, and bones, both animal and human, sealed within small wall niches. Victorian curiosity turned to fear when workers claimed to hear chanting from empty chambers. One explorer in 1864 wrote of voices below the chalk and footsteps that stopped when the light was raised. Whether hysteria or something more, no one knows. But that reputation turned Chislehurst into a legend, a portal to Britain's forgotten past, buried beneath the modern world. During the Second World War, these caves became an underground city. 15,000 people lived here nightly, hiding from the bombs above. Families carved out sections, built kitchens, hospitals, even a chapel, but many refused to sleep near the old altar tunnels. The guards said people vanished there, wandering too far into the black. When the war ended, those areas were sealed off, until the 1960s when archaeologists began re-exploring the deepest sections again. What they found stunned them. Hidden behind collapsed walls were chambers filled with carved seats, circular hollows, and a flat slab coated with black residue, like burnt offerings. The soot analysis revealed animal fat, charcoal, and traces of myrrh resin, materials not local to England, but imported from the Mediterranean world thousands of years ago. That discovery changed everything. Could these underground shrines be linked to ancient trade routes or perhaps to early Phoenician or Druidic rituals? Some even suggested a far older cult, one worshipping earth spirits, the keepers of the underworld. The geometry of the tunnels aligns with the ley lines, the invisible pathways connecting sacred sites across Britain. Stonehenge, Avebury, and Chislehurst, all on the same magnetic track. Coincidence? Or ancient design? Even today, the cave guides tell stories that seem impossible. The Druid altar, a great stone slab in Chamber 4, is said to have been used for human sacrifice. No bodies have ever been found there, but the floor beneath it contains a dark stain that refuses to wash away, even after centuries. Skeptics say it's mineral residue, others aren't so sure. Electronic devices malfunction there, compass needles spin, and sound, the strangest of all, dies out completely. Whisper once and it doesn't echo back. Scientists call it acoustic cancellation, but to those who've been inside, it feels like something else, a silence that listens. Perhaps the most chilling discovery came only recently, when researchers using ground-penetrating radar found a sealed chamber, untouched, hidden behind collapsed chalk. Its shape was unusual, a perfect hexagon, 9 feet across, with what appeared to be an altar in its center. When a probe camera was sent through, it revealed carvings of spiral patterns, similar to those found in Neolithic tombs in Ireland and Brittany. This suggests that whoever carved Chislehurst's first tunnels might have been part of a pan-European ritual culture, one that believed caves were living entities, gateways between worlds. The deeper question, though, remains: why build altars underground? Most temples of the ancient world reached toward the sky, to gods of light, air, and sun. But these sanctuaries reached downward, to darkness, to stone, to the earth itself. Some scholars believe they represent the other half of human faith, the worship of the unseen, the womb of the world where everything begins and ends, the cave as cradle and tomb. Perhaps the people of Chislehurst believed the gods dwelled beneath their feet, not above. Today, Chislehurst caves are open to the public. Dimly lit tours follow old lantern paths, yet most of the original ritual chambers are off-limits, sealed for safety. But if you stand in the central hall and turn off the light, you can still hear it. Water dripping from the ceiling, the hum of the earth itself, and maybe the faint echo of prayers spoken thousands of years ago. Some say you can feel a presence. Others say it's just the air pressure. But everyone agrees on one thing: you don't stay in there alone for long. In the end, the cave altars of Chislehurst remind us that beneath every modern street, beneath every familiar landscape, lies a second world, carved by forgotten hands filled with unanswered questions. Who built them? What faith did they serve? And what did they see in the darkness that we can no longer see? Perhaps the answers were never meant to reach the surface, because some secrets, like the altars of Chislehurst, were built to remain buried, deep within the earth. The wind-sealed tombs of Madan Sila. Across the sandstone deserts of northwestern Saudi Arabia rises a silence so complete, it almost hums. Out here the wind is the only voice, a patient sculptor that has worked for thousands of years. And standing within that wind, like sentinels of forgotten kings, are the monumental facades of Madan Sila, the first UNESCO World Heritage Site of Saudi Arabia, and the southern twin of Petra. To travelers it appears as a city of ghosts, carved straight from rose-red cliffs. But behind those facades lie tombs that nature herself has sealed. Archaeologists call them the wind-sealed tombs, vaults whose doors were fused by centuries of sandstorms until they became one with the rock. The inscriptions above each portal still whisper names written in Nabatean script: merchants, priests, governors, forgotten queens. Yet when the first explorers arrived in the 19th century, many chambers were found unopened, their entrances blocked not by human masonry, but by wind-driven stone and calcified dust as hard as concrete. It was as if the desert decided that some stories should never breathe again. The Nabateans built Madain Saleh around the 1st century BCE, expanding south from their capital, Petra. Their mastery of rock-cut architecture turned barren cliffs into sacred architecture. Tombs tower 20 meters high, carved with perfect symmetry, stepped crowns, eagle motifs, rosettes. Yet what fascinates researchers most is the engineering precision inside: niches, drainage channels, and echo-controlled chambers designed to preserve silence. Each tomb was a world unto itself, prepared for the long sleep of eternity. When modern teams first entered the sealed crypts, they discovered micro-layers of fine sand coating the floors like glass dust. Beneath them lay offerings, incense burners, ceramic jars, still scented faintly with frankincense, and bronze mirrors darkened by age. Radiocarbon dating placed some as early as 90 BCE. But it wasn't only the artifacts that stunned them. It was the preservation. The lack of oxygen had mummified textiles, skin fragments, even strands of braided hair. The wind that sealed these tombs had also kept them intact. Outside, the same wind carved something else: patterns across the cliff faces that resemble fingerprints. Geologists found that these spirals aren't random erosion, but the result of cyclic thermal shock, the day-night temperature swings of the desert, repeatedly expanding and contracting the stone, polishing it smoother each century. Locals once believed these were the fingerprints of jinn, desert spirits who guard the dead. They called the necropolis Al-Hajor, the forbidden place. Ancient texts confirm that even centuries after the Nabateans vanished, travelers avoided this area. Islamic chronicles describe it as a cursed city destroyed by divine wrath, a warning left in stone. And indeed, the site feels uncanny. Tomb entrances aligned precisely toward the rising sun of the equinox, while others face the direction of prevailing winds, as though calibrated to breathe once each season, then fall silent again. The wind-sealed chambers became natural vaults of archaeology and myth. In one, researchers found a narrow slit only a few centimeters wide. Through it, microphones picked up a faint resonance, a low steady hum created by air vibrating through the rock. Acoustic studies revealed that some facades act like aeolian instruments, producing tones when desert gusts pass across their carved edges. Whether intentional or accidental, the tombs literally sing to the wind. But what purpose did such monuments serve for a civilization living in one of the harshest environments on Earth? The Nabateans were traders, masters of water and sand. They built cisterns and channels that captured every drop of rain. Their wealth from frankincense caravans funded cities like Medine Saleh, where death was given the same grandeur as life. Each tomb facade is signed, a legal inscription prohibiting reuse, with fines measured in silver talents. In their world, immortality was property. Then, sometime around the 3rd century CE, the city died. Trade routes shifted. Rome absorbed Nabatea, the wind returned. For nearly 2,000 years, the desert erased their footprints and sealed their doors. The sand filled inscriptions, the carvings softened, and only the facades remained, faces without memory. Today, archaeologists carefully unseal a few of these tombs each decade. They enter wearing respirators, because the air inside has been trapped since antiquity, rich in carbon dioxide, thin in oxygen. The smell is unlike anything else, a dry sweetness of resin, dust, and time. Inside, the silence presses on the ears. Instruments show humidity near zero, temperature constant. Perfect preservation, perfect stillness. Some researchers suggest these tombs functioned as more than graves. Their placement across the valley mirrors constellations visible in the spring sky, particularly the Belt of Orion, the same pattern found at Petra and other Nabatean sites. Could they have built a celestial map in stone? And if so, why align tombs with stars instead of temples? Perhaps death, to them, was a journey of navigation, a voyage across the sky guided by wind and light. Legends among Bedouins say that when a sandstorm sweeps through Al-Hijr, the voices of the dead rise with the wind. Guides speak of hearing flutes or whispers carried between cliffs. Scientists explain it as air turbulence and harmonic vibration, yet even they admit the coincidence. Many of those sounds peak exactly near sealed tomb entrances. The desert still sings for its dead. Standing before Tomb 100, the largest of them all, one can see centuries of erosion frozen mid-motion, ripples that look like flowing fabric. The door, half buried, is now a sculpture of wind itself. Attempts to reopen it have failed. Every time, new sand drifts in, restoring the seal. The site managers have stopped trying. The desert wants it closed, one archaeologist said. As evening falls, shadows climb the cliffs, and the facades glow red under the last sun. It's easy to believe the Nabateans are still here, guarded by the same element that once shaped their world. The wind that carved their tombs now protects them. A perfect paradox. Destruction as preservation. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Nabatean Saleh, a civilization that mastered stone so completely that even time itself became its apprentice. And as the winds continue to sing across Al-Hijr, sealing and unsealing its mysteries grain by grain, one question lingers. Did the Nabateans design this fate, or did the desert simply finish their work? Because here, among the wind-sealed tombs, it is impossible to tell where human hands end, and the hand of the desert begins. The bone-etched tablets of Harappa. Beneath the baked earth of Punjab, where the Ravi River once wound through a greener world, lies the ancient city of Harappa, a name whispered through the dust of archaeology as the twin of Mohenjo-Daro. It is a place where straight avenues, precision-made bricks, and forgotten drains still speak of order and design. Yet among its most haunting relics are not its seals or walls, but something far smaller and infinitely stranger. Tiny fragments of bone, each etched with symbols no one alive can read. They call them the bone-etched tablets of Harappa, artifacts so fragile that some crumble at the touch of light. Each one fits in the palm of a hand. Each bears scratches, loops, and geometric shapes carved with microscopic precision. At first glance, they resemble the Indus script found on clay seals, the same mysterious signs that have resisted translation for over a century. But these are different. They're not pressed or molded, they are cut into animal bone, as though the carver sought to hide meaning inside the remains of life itself. When archaeologists unearthed the first of these pieces in the 1920s, they assumed they were decorative or perhaps gaming tokens. But radiocarbon tests and microscopic scans revealed something far deeper. The grooves were made by a tool sharper than bronze, likely an alloy stylus, heated and drawn with a single motion. The pattern density suggested that whoever carved them was not improvising. They were writing, and if they were, then these could be the earliest portable texts of the Indus Valley civilization. Imagine the scene. 4,000 years ago, in the glow of an oil lamp, a scribe sits within a mud brick workshop. Around him lie shells, ivory and bone from the city's bustling trade in livestock and ornaments. He holds a slender strip of rib bone, smooth and white, and carves the symbols we still cannot read: fish, tridents, trees, horns, and something that looks like a starburst. Perhaps it was a name, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a warning. Then he polishes the surface with fine sand and hands it to a priest, who carries it into the darkness of the Great Bath, where ritual meets water. The mystery of these bone tablets deepens with every discovery. Some were found buried together in small pits, aligned north-south as if deliberately placed. Others were found beneath thresholds, sealed inside houses as though meant to protect the dwelling. The bone itself comes from cattle and buffalo, both sacred and practical to the Harappans, a civilization without kings or palaces, but ruled by balance and trade. And yet within that order, someone felt compelled to carve messages into bone. Why? One theory suggests these tablets served as ancestor tokens, written offerings to spirits of the dead. Another claims they were inventory tags, early examples of record-keeping for trade goods like grain or copper. But then there are tablets found scorched, deliberately broken before burial, hinting at ritual destruction, as if the information they held was never meant to survive. When archaeologists placed high-resolution scans under UV light, traces of pigment appeared in the grooves, faint residues of red ochre and lamp. Whoever made them wanted the writing to be seen, at least for a time. Linguists have long sought the key to the Indus script, comparing it to Sumerian, to Dravidian, even to early Sanskrit, but the bone tablets complicate everything. Some contain symbols never before seen on seals or pottery. Could this be a different dialect, a hidden language of priests or craftsmen? If the seals were public marks of trade, perhaps these bone inscriptions were private texts, messages of initiation, healing, or magic. Archaeologists working in the northern sector of Harappa uncovered one particularly well-preserved specimen, a small rib bone, 10 centimeters long, etched on both sides. When scanned in 3D, it revealed a pattern of 24 repeating signs arranged in mirror symmetry. Mathematicians found the spacing followed a prime number rhythm, a design too deliberate to be coincidence. Was it a code? Or a prayer chanted in cycles, inscribed to hold its own echo? To the people of Harappa, bone carried symbolic weight. It was the residue of life, enduring, flexible, and tied to both body and spirit. Carving meaning into bone may have been their way of binding knowledge to mortality itself. And perhaps that is why so few have survived. When the Indus civilization collapsed around 1900 BCE, floods and drought scattered their cities, but the bones of their language remained buried, fossilized words that no one could resurrect. Even today, the script defies every attempt at translation. It has no bilingual key, no Rosetta Stone. Each sign is both picture and abstraction, a fish that might mean life, or star, or God. The bone-etched tablets stand at the edge of comprehension, an alphabet of silence. When held under a microscope, their carved lines shimmer with mineral residue, traces of the soil that kept them hidden for 4 millennia. Every groove is a breath of a vanished world. Excavators recall the uncanny feeling of finding them. Unlike the sturdy stone seals or terracotta toys, these bones seem alive. Some still bear faint organic smell, the scent of deep time mixed with ancient smoke. As one researcher said, it felt like the city was whispering through the bones. Yet even with all our technology, spectroscopy, AI pattern analysis, algorithmic linguistics, we still can't translate a single complete sentence. It's as if the tablets were written for themselves alone, a language meant to die with its speakers. At night, the winds move across the mounds of Harappa, rustling through half-buried streets. The moonlight catches on the fragments of bone left uncollected, glowing pale against the clay. Somewhere below, thousands more may still lie, sealed under layers of silt, untouched since the Bronze Age. And in each fragment may sleep the thoughts of a civilization that built without kings, ruled without armies, and wrote without words we can read. Perhaps that's the most haunting truth of the Indus Valley, that their greatest monument was not their city, but their silence. And inside that silence, the bone-etched tablets still wait, not for translation, but for understanding. Because maybe the message they carry is not one of words but of endurance, that even the smallest mark carved into the stuff of life can outlast empires. As the sands close over Harappa each evening, and the stars reflect faintly in the dust, the question remains, who carved meaning into bone, and why did they want us to find it? Some say it was devotion. Others say it was fear. But perhaps it was something deeper, a civilization trying to write its heartbeat into the fabric of eternity. And in those tiny bone tablets, that heartbeat still echoes. The hidden chamber of Angkor Wat. Beneath the golden spires of Angkor Wat, where sunlight ripples through lotus ponds and sandstone corridors seem to breathe with the weight of centuries, a mystery sleeps inside the stone. For generations, pilgrims and scholars walked these sacred halls, tracing the carvings of gods and kings, never realizing that deep within the heart of the world's largest temple complex, a hidden chamber lay sealed in silence, a chamber that would not reveal itself until the modern age, and when it did, it challenged everything we thought we knew about Angkor's builders, their faith, and their gods. It began with a map. In 2016, researchers using ground-penetrating radar swept the temple's central axis, the long echoing causeway that leads to the main tower. Their sensors returned an anomaly, a hollow void beneath the sandstone, shaped like a corridor, ending in a small square room. For decades, explorers had suspected that Angkor Wat concealed something beneath its galleries, but the site's delicate structure made excavation nearly impossible. When the imaging data came back, showing not one but two overlapping chambers, archaeologists realized they were looking at something deliberately built and deliberately hidden. When the first access shaft was carefully opened, the air that escaped was stale, heavy, ancient. Inside, the team found a narrow stair descending into the darkness, lined with blocks so perfectly cut that no light passed between them. The passage ended in a stone door sealed with resin and copper pins. When it was finally unlatched, a chamber emerged, barely 3 meters across, yet untouched since the fall of the Khmer Empire. And at its center, illuminated by the trembling light of a torch, stood a statue unlike anything found elsewhere in Angkor. The figure was carved from black stone, gleaming like obsidian, though the mineral was unknown in the region. Its form was unmistakably human, yet its face was worn smooth, as though time or ritual had erased its identity. Around its base lay offerings, beads, lotus petals turned to dust, fragments of bronze mirrors, and a ring of gold leaf pressed into the floor, forming a perfect circle. The statue faced east, toward the rising sun. But what caught the team's attention wasn't its craftsmanship, it was the placement. The chamber aligned precisely with the central tower above, a hidden mirror of the heavens. Historians soon connected the discovery to Angkor Wat's celestial design, a temple mapped to the stars, its towers aligned with constellations marking the cycles of time and rebirth. But why seal a statue underground, unseen by any worshipper? Some believe the chamber was an initiation vault, a place where only the highest priests performed rituals invoking Vishnu's cosmic rebirth. Others suggest it was a sarcophagus for a divine effigy, representing the soul of the king himself. Surya Varman II, the ruler who built Angkor Wat as both temple and tomb. Yet no inscriptions name him here, and no remains were found, only silence, and that faceless figure. Microscopic analysis of the resin sealing the chamber dated it to around the 13th century, about 100 years after the temple's completion, around the time the empire began to decline. Someone, long after Angkor's golden age, had come back to hide the statue deliberately. Some of the offerings were not Khmer at all, small pieces of Chinese porcelain, beads from India, signs of an empire reaching its final twilight, trying to preserve its soul beneath the stone. When the chamber's air was analyzed, scientists found something strange, traces of sandalwood oil and beeswax, trapped for over 7 centuries. To recreate such a mixture would have required a ritual, a sealing ceremony, perhaps meant to imprison or protect whatever energy the idol represented. Local monks whisper of a guardian spirit, a being bound beneath Angkor to protect the temple from invaders. In their stories, the faceless statue was not forgotten, it was sacrificed to keep the empire safe. As excavation continued, laser scans of the surrounding galleries revealed faint bas-relief carvings partially erased beneath later restorations. One panel seemed to depict a descent, priests carrying an idol into darkness, torches flickering, faces turned away. The carving ends abruptly, as though intentionally defaced. Could this be a visual record of the sealing ritual itself? When news of the hidden chamber spread, historians debated its meaning fiercely. Some dismissed it as a storeroom or an unfinished crypt. Others saw it as evidence that Angkor's architects combined religion and advanced geometry in ways we are only beginning to understand. The alignment of the vault with the temple's solar axis is too precise to be coincidence. Each equinox, the rising sun passes directly through Angkor's main doorway and falls along that invisible line, the same line that pierces the heart of the hidden chamber below. For a few seconds each year, light meets darkness, and the faceless statue is bathed in gold. Those who have entered the chamber speak of an uncanny quiet, a pressure in the air that feels alive. Even after the statue was documented and sealed again to prevent damage, Monks still light incense above it during certain festivals. They call it the sleeping god, and some believe the chamber must never be fully opened again. Yet questions remain. Why was the statue faceless? Why was it hidden so deliberately? And what power did it represent that even kings feared to reveal it? The answers, like much of Angkor's history, may lie between faith and geometry, between myth and engineering. For the Khmer builders, the universe itself was a pattern to be replicated in stone. Each tower was a mountain, each moat an ocean, each corridor a path between worlds. Perhaps the hidden chamber was not a tomb at all, but a mechanism, a spiritual machine, synchronizing the temple with the cosmos. As the Cambodian dawn rises over Angkor Wat, golden light fills the lotus ponds and spills across the carved walls, touching every god and demon in bas relief. Somewhere beneath those stones, the faceless statue waits in its eternal chamber, sealed in shadow, aligned with the sun, guarding its secret. It is a reminder that even in a temple built to glorify light, the greatest mystery may still rest in the dark, and maybe that's the true heart of Angkor Wat, a monument not only to gods or kings, but to the human desire to hide meaning inside beauty. Because for all its grandeur, its carvings, and its endless corridors, the temple's most profound message was buried, waiting for the world to listen. The glyphs buried in ice. In the endless white expanse of northern Siberia, where the wind cuts like glass and time itself seems frozen, there lies a place older than memory, a site so ancient it rewrote human history. They call it Yana Rhs, after the river that winds through the Arctic tundra. To archaeologists, it was once just another Ice Age campsite, but what they found here, etched into bone, ivory, and frozen earth, revealed something no one expected. Symbols, deliberate and precise, carved tens of thousands of years before writing was supposed to exist. At first it was the bones that drew attention: mammoth tusks, reindeer antlers, wolf skulls, all arranged in strange patterns beneath the permafrost. In 2001, when a team of Russian scientists began excavating, they expected to find tools, maybe weapons. Instead, they uncovered artifacts that defied explanation. On the surface of tusks and ivory fragments were tiny incised marks, not scratches from butchering or decoration, but organized sequences, repeating in groups, flowing like a script across the surface. When the ice was gently melted away, entire panels of engraved symbols began to emerge: spirals, crosshatches, dots, and angular lines, patterns with rhythm, order, and meaning. At first, the researchers assumed these were simple tally marks, counts of animals hunted or days tracked. But the precision of the carving told another story. Each symbol had been incised with deliberate depth and spacing, some linked by faint connecting lines as though forming phrases. These weren't random marks, they were glyphs, a language of ice and bone. The deeper the team dug, the stranger it became. Beneath one frozen layer, they found what looked like a small platform built from mammoth bones, surrounded by ivory rods standing upright like pillars. In the center was a carved disc, no larger than a hand, with 24 distinct symbols around its edge. Radiocarbon testing dated it to 31,000 years ago, making it nearly twice as old as the earliest known written systems. For years, scholars argued that symbolic writing didn't emerge until Mesopotamia, around 3200 BCE. The Yana disc shattered that belief. But there was something even more mysterious about these glyphs. Their resemblance to later symbols found thousands of kilometers away. When the engravings were compared to markings on Ice Age artifacts from France's Grotte du Placard and Spain's La Pasiega cave, patterns began to overlap. Identical shapes, zigzags, parallel lines, and chevrons appeared across continents. It was as if, long before nations or civilizations, humanity already shared a common symbolic language, one born in the ice. As the permafrost thawed around Yana, the frozen world slowly gave up more of its secrets. Buried tools made from mammoth ivory showed microscopic wear consistent with engraving, not hunting. Nearby, a set of ivory beads strung in a repeating pattern seemed to mirror the order of the glyphs, as if the symbols had been woven into adornments, carried as amulets or mnemonic devices. Could these have been early forms of memory technology, ways to record events, seasons, or even myths? But then came the discovery that changed everything. A section of ivory bearing not symbols, but a scene. Two figures, crudely yet unmistakably human, stood facing what appeared to be a spiral, surrounded by marks radiating outward like rays. It looked like a story, one of movement, transformation, or worship. The Ice Age people of Yana, once thought to be simple hunter-gatherers, were suddenly revealed as artists, storytellers, and perhaps the first scribes of the frozen world. The implications were staggering. If these glyphs truly carried meaning, they could represent the earliest attempt at recording human thought, a frozen script predating civilization itself. Some anthropologists propose that the Yana people might have been the ancestors of a forgotten cultural lineage, a northern branch of humanity whose ideas spread both east into Asia and west into Europe, seeding the symbolic traditions that would later evolve into true writing. But skeptics argued that such connections were coincidence, that humans facing similar environments simply made similar marks. Yet, as one researcher pointed out, the consistency of the patterns across thousands of kilometers and millennia was too precise to dismiss. These weren't idle decorations. They were deliberate, repeated, taught, remembered. Even stranger were the magnetic scans taken of the engraved artifacts. On several ivory pieces, faint residues of iron oxide and manganese suggested the use of pigments, red and black, meaning the glyphs had once been painted. Under ultraviolet light, traces of those pigments glowed faintly, forming outlines invisible to the naked eye. Whoever made them had intended for the marks to be seen, perhaps in firelight, where the red glow of embers could have made them come alive, flickering symbols of power, warning, or prayer. Then, in 2023, a core sample near the original site revealed something buried deeper, beneath layers of ice, untouched since the Pleistocene. There, scientists uncovered an entire mammoth shoulder blade, carved with lines that spiraled inward to a single symbol at the center. When digitally enhanced, that central glyph resembled the later proto-sign for the sun, a circle with a dot inside. If true, this would mean that cosmic symbols, the language of the heavens, were already being conceived 30 millennia before recorded astronomy. But who carved them, and what drove them to create a language no one would read for tens of thousands of years? To answer that, archaeologists studied the environment around Yana, a world locked in ice, yet teeming with life. The people who lived here hunted mammoths, foxes, and reindeer under auroras that burned green across the frozen sky. They lived at the very edge of human endurance. Yet, amid this harshness, they created symbols. They dreamed, and they carved those dreams into bone. Perhaps, when they looked up at the swirling lights of the Arctic night, they saw patterns, messages written across the heavens. And maybe, with nothing but ivory and fire, they tried to speak back to the sky. Today, the glyphs of Yana remain a mystery. Some researchers are now using AI pattern analysis to compare them with linguistic structures, searching for repetition or syntax. Others suggest they're ritual codices, instructions for ceremonies that kept the tribe in balance with nature's cycles. A few even speculate that they represent maps, not of land but of time, tracking the great migrations of animals or the turning of the stars. But perhaps the truth is simpler and more profound. The glyphs may not have been made to communicate with others at all, but with themselves. A frozen dialogue between humans and their world, carved in a moment of survival and wonder. As the Arctic wind howls across the Yana River and the ice continues to thaw, more of these artifacts rise from the ground, their carvings still sharp after 30 millennia. Each one is a message, written by hands long gone, from a world that should have been silent, yet wasn't. The people of Yana spoke in symbols of bone and fire, and through those marks they whisper still. Because long before the first words were written, before tablets or papyrus or ink, there was ice, and there were glyphs. Frozen beneath the tundra, waiting to remind us that even in the coldest reaches of Earth, the human need to leave a mark, to be remembered, was already alive.